Hello and welcome to the Matt Fradd Show. I am Matt Fradd. Today I'll be interviewing Luke and Gomer from the podcast Catching Foxes. Maybe you've heard of it, catchingfoxes.fm. We discuss a whole host of issues. It was a fascinating discussion the entire time. Let's see, what did we talk about? We talked about being Catholic in today's day and age. We talked about Catholic celebrities. We talked about the morality of UFC fighting. We asked the question, what's the best, worst superpower you can think of? Just a fun, rollicking conversation, which I think you're really going to enjoy. Before we get into it, I want to say thanks to two of our sponsors that have helped to make this show possible. The first is Covenant Eyes. So I am a big proponent of Covenant Eyes, and I think you ought to have Covenant Eyes. If you use technology and you find yourself perhaps attracted, tempted to the dark side of the internet, to pornography, Covenant Eyes is a must-have. It's both filtering and accountability software. So it not only blocks the bad stuff like a good filter should, it's also accountability software. So it'll send a report of your internet activity to an accountability partner of your choosing. Just imagine if you're online, you feel tempted to look at porn, but you know if you go there, your brother, your friend, your grandma, wouldn't recommend that, is going to get a report of where you've been. It makes you a lot less likely to go there, and it helps remind you that these personal sins don't just affect you, right? You've got to have it, especially if you've got kids. If you have children, and if they have access to the internet, a tablet, a phone, a computer, Covenant Eyes is necessary. I often think, you and me, we know the sort of things that we bump into without looking for it. Do you really want your child bumping into this stuff? I mean, they're not formed morally enough. They might find themselves curious, which they should because sex is natural, and all of a sudden they find themselves in this awful place looking at pornography that back in the 90s was only available on the black market. It's really disturbing stuff. But the point of this isn't to scare you. The point of this is to give you hope. Covenant Eyes is fantastic. It's very affordable. You can try it for free right now by going to covenanteyes.com and using the promo code when you check out Matt Fradd. That's one word, MATTFRADD. When you do that, they'll give you a month for free so you can try the software. If you don't like it, cancel it. You won't be charged a penny. But I promise you that you're going to want to use it. I have it. I use it. I pay for it. I have it on all of my devices. I won't let our kids play at other people's houses unless they have good accountability and filtering software like Covenant Eyes. So go check that out, covenanteyes.com. And when you check out, use the promo code MattFradd. That'll give you a month free, and it'll let them know that I sent you. Secondly, I want to say big thanks to Exodus 90. You have been hearing more and more about Exodus 90 lately, haven't you? That's because literally tens of thousands of men from around the world are signing up to this thing. What is Exodus 90? It's a spiritual boot camp for men, where men get into little fraternities, 3 men, 4 men in the same city or something like that. They then commit to give up certain pleasures like social media, hot showers, snacking between meals. They take on things like extra prayers before the Blessed Sacrament, praying the Rosary and the like, and reading daily meditations. And they do this so that they can free themselves from these things that are enslaving them so that they can better love. And the reports that I'm hearing from people who have done Exodus 90 are absolutely astounding. If it's time, and it is time, to take your spiritual life to the next level, go to Exodus 90, that's exodus90.com/MattFradd. When you type in /MattFradd and sign up, you'll get 3 exclusive videos that you won't find anywhere else on the web of me kind of encouraging you and letting you know a bit more about the program. We're trying to get a big push during Lent for men to begin this. So again, go to exodus90.com/MattFradd. That's exodus90.com/MattFradd. Again, that'll help you get those 3 exclusive videos, and they'll know that I sent you, and they'll like me more, and they'll be willing to advertise again because they'll know that it worked. But honestly, I really don't want to get to the point where I'm advertising things I don't believe in, ever. I really believe in Exodus 90. I think it's a really manful response to the crisis we're currently in the church today. It can be tempting just to sit around and to gossip and to point fingers. I think it's a much more manly thing to sacrifice and to fast for love of the church and so that you can become a better man. So check that out, exodus90.com/MattFradd. All right, here's the show. Hey!
Woo!
What's up?
Spring Mango 6! Intercepted!
If I wasn't held down by all these wires, that would have been less awkward. How's it going?
Oh, man, it's going to be better when I get this coffee now.
Yeah, it's good coffee.
Good coffee.
Oh, man.
Better people.
Hipster pour-over method. I love it.
Yeah, well, I only got this because I thought it would look better on my table with my black background than just a random black French press, which is what we've been doing up until now.
We need an exposed brick wall to really kind of bring it all together.
I know I do need that.
Yeah.
Exposed brick wall never gets old. Will there ever be a time when we look back on videos of exposed brick walls and say, that is so 2018?
I think that's the pallet wood background, where you have the rustic pallet wood.
2015. Good times.
Good times. Yeah. Thank you, evangelical churches and their stage
Yeah.
setups.
Thanks, Magnolia.
What's Magnolia?
There's some people from
Magnolia
Texas.
Farms, Chip and Joanna Gaines?
No. Is it an evangelical thing?
They are.
Yeah,
but
yeah. It's from Texas, so
it's
yes.
Home and Garden Television show.
They make cool
Fixer
things,
Upper?
and they
Fixer
have stuff at not Fixer Upper.
You watch those home improvement shows?
That show, yes, because my wife got obsessed with it. I was like, this is cool.
I only watch those shows if I'm in the doctor's waiting room. and you can tell the audience they're aiming at because the adverts are for like Viagra and Depends, and things like that.
Why are there bathtubs in a forest? Oh, it's a Cialis commercial.
Oh, really? I haven't seen that one.
Always what they do.
It's very awkward and weird.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, how you doing?
I'm doing well.
Good.
Yeah, I'm super pumped about this. I've been a fan of you guys for a long time. Y'all were pretty much one of the first Catholic podcasts, right? Prior to, there's going to be these little ones that no one really knows about,
Yeah.
like local radio stations and stuff. But y'all were one of the first.
Well, so the big thing is how you define podcast, because ours is a show, right? A lot of people will have homilies and prayers and come pray the rosary with Aunt Jean and stuff.
Aunt Jean.
But what were you going to say, Luke? I promise I won't interrupt you.
3 hours of this. I think ours was one of the first ones. Besides, Catholic stuff you should know had been around for a while.
Those are the
stare
kings,
up
for sure.
when I think, and we're in a conversation, so I need to be doing this. I apologize.
No, you're great.
He's so self-conscious.
And always. I think ours was probably one of the first ones that, you're right, that had this idea of like, we know what kind of podcast we like, and we want to do a podcast in this style about things that we care about. So I think in terms of, I think that's a really good way to put it, that we were the first show that
achieved some level of success in the Catholic. Because I'm sure
y'all were kind of on podcasting right before the wave hit. I think,
the big wave, yeah.
Yeah, I think I got on it just as it was cresting.
Yeah, you win.
And now there's 8 billion.
And now you've got this thing.
Oh, and I'm not saying that it's more successful. I'm just saying I got on just as it was getting popular, whereas you guys were doing it before it was cool.
And I think I think too, like one of the differences between ours and other podcasts is we'd be doing this even if it wasn't really all that big.
Yeah.
Like we genuinely,
we were giddy when we got 300 downloads.
Yeah.
And they were all Franciscan people that we went to school with.
I remember after the first episode, I couldn't fall asleep because just like walking around, be like, "This is it." Like we just like because we're such big fans of the
medium,
itself and like when we did our pornography episode number 8, I remember. So I was at a camp with a group called Evangelical Catholic doing one of their conferences.
Yeah.
And Gomer said, "Hey," because that was an episode where we were like, "Oh, like this is like we kind of finally did the podcast we wanted to do."
Yeah.
Like this is it. And I remember you stayed up very late editing it, and I was in this parking lot at like 2-3 in the morning. I bought a pack of cigarettes to keep me busy, and just walked around smoking, and I'm listening to it, which I don't smoke all that much, and I was just like, "Oh my gosh, we did it! Like this is it! Like we did it! And like this is what we're going to do." And it wasn't like, "Oh, this is going to be big." It was like if I kind of imagine if you're a band and you're trying to like create this sound or an album and you do it. That's what I had in my head.
That's really respectable. And I think that is the sign that your podcast is going to be successful if you genuinely would continue to do it whether or not people were listening. Like this is a genuine love that you have. And your love and your joy and your enthusiasm and your giddiness comes out in the podcast. And I think people they get that.
Yeah, the interesting thing is, so our podcast originally was just me and Luke talking for 2.5 hours about productivity tips, which is hysterical because we're the most unproductive men.
Yeah,
that's how it started?
It was not what we wanted it to be, but we love those kinds of podcasts.
Oh, yeah.
So it basically, there's a podcast called Back to Work.
Is this, I've heard
that
of
we
it.
love.
Yeah.
And we said we can't make it back to work, which is like an hour and a half talking about productivity. I mean, it takes them a half hour just to like.
It's like 45 minutes of a conversation about everything, and it's funny and blah, blah, blah. And then it's like, here's the one key concept that we want you to understand. And we would do that. But I think that's how you figure these things out, especially with such a new medium. You imitate. And so this is a funny...
That's what I'm doing here.
Right.
You know, with Joe Rogan and all these other guys who are doing long form. I see it. I like it. I'd like to do something like it.
And then as you go, you find your voice.
That's right, yeah.
We had, one of the things that I always love in podcasts is the interview show. Like sitting down, and Luke's a big fan of The Nerdist and what's his name? Mark Moran.
WTF with Mark Moran.
Yeah. And so on episode 7, we interviewed our first guest, someone that I had never met, never talked to before in my life, Arlene Spenceley.
Yeah.
And we had her on the show, and it went so well that when we hung up with her, we went right into episode 8, and we recorded them back to back. And so and at one point I was so giddy, I was leaning back in my chair, and the back broke and I fell down. And I left it in the show to hear this crash.
I think I heard of it.
Yeah. A buddy of ours was driving down the highway listening to it, and he thought he ran over something, so he pulled over. But that's the whole idea. See, the funny thing is, we have 5 or 6 episodes that we recorded that will never see the light of day.
We made a GeoCity joke in that was our thing.
The Taylor Swift, GeoCities, and there was like one
Would
other
you ever
joke.
post that just for your patrons? I mean, you could build the hype around these 6 and make some bling.
Do you have them?
I think I do, but there's not a reason to listen. Like, they're not
great.
good.
They're not good.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's the
because
point.
it's us just trying to figure it out. And we even made a deal with ours because we wrote a document. We're like, okay, let's outline what are our principles,
That's
what
awesome.
are we, and we never went back to it. But I think it was good for us to put it on
Absolutely.
paper.
I never had that being solo, and I'm envious of this kind of relationship you get to have and do this together. It's cool.
Yeah. How do you I'm actually curious to ask you about that. So how do you handle your success? Because we can talk about it, and we can get really excited, and we can kind of call each other out on certain things. Like when we do a live show, we always get the same hotel room because hotels alone bad. How do you How do you?
I mean, same bed even.
Yeah.
Like king size, twin, doesn't matter.
One hammock from corner to corner because it's a really bad hotel with no beds.
Hi, do you have just trampolines?
But if you're excited about a show, I'm sorry, I'm Matt, let me tell you how alone you are.
No.
If you have something go really well, who can you talk to about that feels like? I mean, I'm sure
probably
your wife Cameron.
Yeah.
Does she listen?
Sometimes. I'm always surprised that she actually enjoys the stuff that I do.
That's how I feel about with my wife,
Because
too.
I think a lot of the time, if somebody was showing me something they were really excited about, I could see myself pretending to be excited because I like them.
Yeah.
But she genuinely wants to see these. Oh, no, keep playing it like that. I'm like, oh, thanks.
My wife listens to nothing I do. At all.
Well,
Doesn't involve NASCAR. She
you're gonna
doesn't
learn
care.
NASCAR.
My wife
yeah.
only watches NASCAR.
No NASCAR? I'd rather not.
No, thank you.
No NASCAR, no thank you.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things that's really great about your show is honestly that you guys speak like 2 men who are having a conversation that isn't trying to convince anyone of anything else. Because I think what we've done in evangelization and apologetics and things like that is we've talked a lot about the tips in evangelizing.
Yeah.
But tips always end up feeling fake with people. You got to try to do this. But what I love about your show is you are genuinely not trying to convert anyone. It's just about having a real chat.
Yeah.
And I suspect that because of that, you're actually reaching more people than if you were employing the techniques that a good evangelist ought to use.
Yeah, so it's hard to hear you say that because I have a show where all I do is that for Ascension Press.
Cue winking at the camera.
But no, it's very true because the idea is authenticity. And when you feel like you are doing a project with a person, turning a person into a project, you have to fake authenticity, and it's weird. So for us, the whole concept around this show is we're having an honest conversation that we let listeners listen to.
Yeah.
And the cool thing about the show is by having the show, we get to interview people that we like and cool things happening. So all that stuff. But so one of the things about our show is we have cussing, right? We cuss sometimes more than others. And but the idea is people will write in and they'll say things like don't ever stop cussing, as if the cussing is the point.
Yes.
Yeah,
It's not. It's the honesty is the point.
Yeah, because you can tell when people are cussing to try and be cool, right? And that's not what you're doing.
They do it in our emails all the time.
And
it's weird.
At times, people will.
You know when you meet someone for the first time and they drop an F-bomb, you're like, whoa,
Yeah,
that's weird. I don't know
It is
you.
a little bit I'm like, I don't want to. I've honestly felt bad about it at times because I don't want to be that guy.
You earn the right to drop an F-bomb in front of me.
Well, I mean, but I don't want to be the guy who's like like church authority's bad, or like not
doing
not
it for the
church
sake
authority,
of being
but-
rebellious or
Yeah,
something.
yeah.
That's clearly not. No, you just talk
Yeah.
like you talk in private.
Yeah, and if so,
which is kind of a tragedy.
Yeah.
That's how we talk.
and
in private.
it was even like in the beginning. I don't know if this was the right approach for me, but I think I just kind of had to. For I don't know why, but I
you work for the
really,
church.
yeah. I actively didn't want to call it a ministry. What we did, I didn't want to pray before our shows, which sounds terrible.
You're trying to set the mood.
Yeah,
Right? This
and
is something other than that.
And
Yeah.
because I am very for as much of like it's just a conversation because I love the medium so much and I do view it a bit as an art form. There is we don't talk about this a lot, but there is, I think, an intention to craft the show. Like, this is why I don't want Gomer to ever not edit it because it's his voice and
I see. As opposed to paying somebody to edit it.
Yeah,
You mean,
and like we had a guy who did it. He's a big fan of the show. Great guy, really nice. Did a great job.
And as a phenomenal editor.
Yeah,
Right.
phenomenal. But I think
So it's more professional in a sense, but it wasn't your
wasn't
style.
me.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's not, again, this is nothing against that guy because we've never actually told this to him, but he did a great job. But
Hope you don't watch YouTube.
but like he can never be Gomer.
Yeah.
It's like there are certain
That needs to be on a
producers
t-shirt.
who
You can never be Gomer.
you never be Gomer that like they have a certain sound
Yeah.
and you want to go to him because he's going to give you that sound and that
Yeah.
is you can't fake that.
I want to ask you, what do you think about the morality of cussing in general then? Clearly, you don't think it's immoral or else you wouldn't do it. So what are your thoughts for and against it?
Yeah. I mean, the book of Sirach is very clear that abusive language is a sign of immaturity, and St. Paul talks about, careless speech or whatnot. So there is this element of how I would see using rough language, right, is a manifestation of immaturity.
Granted.
Yeah.
I guess.
Sorry.
Maybe. I don't know.
But it's also, it can put people off. It can absolutely. In fact, when we first started, the number one complaint that we got, in fact, the only complaint
You probably
that we
have
got,
some good reviews up here. Hey, we could check it out.
We have some interesting ones. We have some interesting ones.
But it was all about like, why are you cussing and all this stuff, and they were really frustrated with it. But we would get all these emails from priests and religious and people in ministry, and they would say like, "Thank you for doing that. It shows your authenticity, right?" And that's the whole point of it. Like, we don't ever.
Here we go. Most critical review.
I go through. Yeah, that's the
Do you
first
mind if we
one.
do this? We can
No,
also
no,
do
it's
this
fine.
on Points with Aquinas.
No, this is fine.
Really, guys? I look for your podcast because you're supposed to lead our parish mission, and kudos for plugging Amazing Parish. Not cool to drop an F-bomb 10 seconds later.
Sure did.
No matter how upset you are about the scandal in the church, please open up the New Testament sometime soon. Have a blessed day.
I mean, he's not wrong about a lot that. I assume it's a he.
Well, I mean.
Okay, we gotta read this one. Jerks for Jesus isn't a thing. Only time I felt strongly enough to interact with catching foxes on social media with what I felt was a pretty polite and thoughtful, though slightly critical Facebook comment. Luke responded rudely, reminded me of a life lesson I learned in my time at Franciscan, but apparently forgot. It's never worth your while to listen to blowhards who publicly evangelize to people where they're at, but can't emotionally regulate enough to have decent person-to-person interactions. Online counts. Jesus can see the internet too. If you want Catholics who tackle hard-hitting issues but also embody Christ-like attitude, look elsewhere. Anyway.
Wait, yeah.
Is there more?
Oh, yeah, because I've
Pro
read this
tip,
several times.
if you can't handle criticism, even generally polite, constructive criticism, don't take up a hobby that invites it.
I mean, she's
That's
not wrong.
No, that's a good.
She's
a good
not
line.
wrong, but like the problem is
How
that
do you know it's a she? You know
because
who did-
I know
yeah.
exactly what conversation this person was talking about. And to be fair, like I don't know if I completely agree that it was a polite little thing.
Yeah.
But it was after an episode. So this is the weird part I think about podcasts is sometimes people don't understand because she's right about like don't do this if you can't take the heat. And I'm
Yeah.
like, but to do the kind of podcast that we do is really vulnerable.
It really is.
That's
That's what I love about you, Luke. You're so vulnerable. Like you say stuff where the
needy.
Yeah, no, but I think people really appreciate that. Like you don't have to totally crystallize your thought and your opinion on a particular topic in order to talk about it. That's one of the beautiful things about podcasts. People can think through things in real time. Yeah. We don't all have to have a fast and fast opinion on every topic imaginable.
Yeah. Which is why I like I like our show is at least an hour, and I don't ever want it to be a thing where it's 20 minutes to a half hour because I want the freedom to like change my mind during the show.
Yeah.
I want the freedom to like
and that's
change.
And me and Luke, the reason why
I got to do the same for me now that I've done it with you.
Me and Luke are external processors, right? So we have to talk things out, which makes for a better podcast. I mean, if you had two people who are internal processors and they just kind of think quietly and then state their crafted opinion, but we literally, I mean, we change our minds during the show.
Yeah.
And I think, so like that, so that episode in particular was a little bit, I don't remember like what it was on. I think it was like race things or something. Oh, it was the ones about the Mexican stuff at the border and kids being detained.
Yeah.
And we were trying to like, and you kind of went a little bit against what was like the woke response to that, if you will.
Sure.
And it was really uncomfortable to have to go down that road, but it's like at least we're trying to like get to the truth of what's going on here. Yeah. And we were just bombarded with stuff, and I saw her thing, and I was like, and it kind of was like, and so I've learned to try to, and I'm sorry, person, I almost stared at the camera. I apologize.
No, that's the one that's.
We are both
You're
sorry.
wrong. I'm right. You're smart. I'm dumb. You're attractive. I'm not good looking.
But you're still wrong.
And so I've had to learn that I can't, because I want to engage about when we have tough stuff. Yeah. But it's it is kind of difficult to like when it comes from a vulnerable place.
Yeah.
Like, I think I probably, to be honest, would have to wait a couple months.
Yeah, like an analogy I'm thinking of is if I were to get up and give a talk on the dogmas surrounding the Blessed Virgin Mary, or a talk where I share my personal testimony, if I get criticism for that second one, that's going to hurt a lot more than the one where I'm just giving a speech. Because I'm sharing myself.
Yeah, and Bishop Barron talked about, in reference to the whole Cov Catholic thing, he said he was, I'm not going to state any opinion on like what actually happened. He said, I want to talk about what the reaction was and how demonic it was. And his whole point was...
Did he use that phrase?
Yeah. And his whole he said it was a work of Satan and all this stuff. But his whole phrase or critique around that was, in the past, if you were angry at an editorial, you wrote a letter to the editor. You had to think about it. You had to write. You had to put in an envelope, put a stamp on it. I mean, that would take me out of the game.
Provides a bit of detachment, I think, in the long run.
But now it's unreflective comboxing.
And that's what's happening right now while we're doing this video. Yeah. This video is going to premiere, and so people are commenting literally right now as we're talking and can just spew whatever they want to spew.
Yeah, and so the problem is like people enter into an individual show without realizing. It's actually because of your show I got this comment. Someone said, I saw you, heard something about you guys on the Matt Fradd show that you're coming up, and so I've never heard you guys, so I listened to an episode, and then blah, 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 and he just launched into us, and it was... So this is the thing where me and Luke say, well, you're not wrong. Like, the comments that he said weren't wrong in his critique of our show, but it's because he doesn't understand the broader thing of the show. It's not like we have everything wrapped up with a nice, neat bow at the end of every show. It's this ongoing thing. So he was yelling at me for not rebuking Luke for his comments about Michael Voris.
Right. And, it's not your podcast isn't like 3 things you need to know about church militant and modern media.
And it was, and I just want to add something really quick. Like going back to like the idea of like when is it okay to cuss? I think context is what kind of matters here. Like our show has an explicit tag. If there is an episode where it's a bit bad, we say, hey, don't listen to this around kids. This is not meant, I mean, we talk about like heavy things.
I like to differentiate cussing into different categories. Cussing is not a word we use in Australia. I never heard cussing until I came to America.
Really?
And in Australia, people swear a lot. I mean, it's very much like that. I remember my wife came to visit me in Australia. Not to visit me, but we were dating and she came to visit. And she went to confession and confessed swearing, which she barely ever does. And the priest honestly couldn't figure out why she was confessing that. So I like to distinguish between like blasphemy, which is intrinsically evil. Maybe something like vulgarity, but not in the traditional sense, but more in the sexual sense, where you're using it in a way that implies something sexual or base that could lead somebody to temptation. But I don't think when we use common words that we use when we swear that elicits that type of thought, or it depends on the context. So I'm of the opinion that you can use a well-placed word in a particular context.
To effectively drive your point
Yes,
home.
I think that's true.
Yeah, so, you think of the words like swearing means you're invoking, like when you take the Lord's name in vain, you're invoking an oath, right? And you like, what's the phrase in Exodus? It was like, may the Lord look upon you and judge, right? That is a swear, like you're invoking these oaths. Peter, when he denied Christ, right, he said he invoked cursing upon himself. So the swearing and cursing, if you study good old Scott Hahn's theology, right, when you invoke an oath, you're invoking curses on yourself if you break the oath. So then along our culture develops and we come up with this thing called, you ever heard this phrase, minced oath?
No.
It's where you say, gosh darn it. That's a minced oath. It's like you take an oath, and you chop it up, and you make it sanguine or saccharine and palatable, you know. Consarnate, cheese and crackers, right?
My family goes, Shania Twain, like that.
Yeah.
But so that's the whole idea of you take these overtly religious invoking oath things, and then you morph them into a PG version. And the funny thing is, dropping an F-bomb is actually less offensive in that regard than saying gosh darn it, because a minced oath is a PG version of invoking a curse and invoking the name of the Lord, right?
Yeah,
It's funny when you start to think about how these words, so vulgarity means common.
Yes.
That's why we get the Latin vulgate, right?
Yep.
A profanity means you take a sacred thing and you use it commonly.
There you go.
And so that's like whole layers of awful.
For me, one of the place especially where I think where swearing becomes seriously problematic is where when you hear people who are angry and they start swearing, they may as well, and my friend Father Chris Prochashko pointed this out to me, that it's almost like they've reverted from being rational beings, and they're kind of like apes who are now beating their chest and making sounds.
Yeah.
Like they've ceased to be rational, and they're just...
Oh, yeah.
And so in that sense, I can see why it would be inappropriate and immoral. What about your children? I mean, you wouldn't want your children to be dropping F-bombs, and why is that?
Right, because this is the distinction that I think that we need to understand, right? Is you are forming kids in the use of language, right? A person who is mature can learn to wield the language, right?
Yeah.
But a kid would, and kids do this, right? If they hear you stub your toe and cuss, all of a sudden they latch onto that and they'll say it. They don't understand the use of the term.
They don't understand like the context of what's going on. And so there's just this...
They don't understand that daddy's getting into woodworking, turned on a table saw, and got scared.
It's a weird way, like, why does it cause a scandal? It's almost like there's a bit of innocence that gets lost with that. And it just, I don't know, it is. Yeah. And so I think...
Reminds me of that line in Infinity Wars where they're like, they're going to go to this magical Nordic place and have a weapon forged. And the guy goes, he says the name, and he goes, that's a made-up word. And Thor's like, all words are made up.
Yeah, I love that line. All right, let's get to some hate mail for me here.
I know, I was like, you have as many one-star reviews as we have.
Well, I actually think it's a badge.
11!
Yeah, I think it's a badge of honor to have one-star reviews because it means you're reaching people.
Yeah.
Who, whereas I might just be reaching what am I doing? Oh, yeah, here we go.
I can't stand all the 2,281 5-star reviews.
Here we go. Not really that profound. Do not expect this podcast to take you beyond the level of a high school philosophy class. This guy follows Peter Kraft in his blind worship of Thomas Aquinas. For them, Aquinas is always right. If you are a conservative Catholic, you might like it, though.
Man, Leslie, punch him below the belt with that Peter Kraft comment.
Matt Fradd is a staunch advocate for recovery from porn addiction, and it's really apparent because the topic of porn and sexuality comes up way more often than probably needs to. This show is great when it actually focuses on Aquinas. Okay, I don't think that's an appropriate critique. I think it's wrong because I barely ever touch upon pornography in Pints with Aquinas.
But here's the deal. That's not a 2-star review. That's like...
it's weird because...
Hang on, why do you only see 1 star here?
Because you probably only have one.
Because that's the most critical. Yeah. And so, here's the thing, too. I think with a lot of ours, very rarely do we get people who say, I don't like the format of this show. It does happen, but it's always like... Because it's like... it's not about like the actual show itself. It's a thing that you say that they don't like.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of just like, well,
See, think about this. Matt has spent his years cultivating this. Production quality is amateurish. Discussion of Aquinas is good, but sometimes it isn't worth listening through a whole episode in short. I like the idea of Pints with Aquinas, but not as Matt Fradd implements it.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, here's your life work.
I like Matt Fradd's idea, but not the way that Matt Fradd
it's like he's saying, I like the idea
idea
of Pints with Aquinas. I just rather Matt not be there.
Yeah.
That's fair enough. Well, I tell you, one thing that's difficult for me is, that's been honestly like a difficult thing for me to try and reconcile is, I'm not an expert in Aquinas, and I'm not an expert in philosophy, and I wouldn't even consider myself an intellectual. And so I do have people who are coming who probably shouldn't be listening to my podcast. Like they should probably be listening to the Thomistic Institute or something different. And so having to like come to grips with that and know my lane has been a period of growth for me.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Has that challenged or changed how you consume other content?
Oh, that's a good question.
Luke's a natural.
So what do you mean by that? Like what I'm going for when I go to a particular...
I think there are times now when I hear a podcast and if I don't like the way that they go, I'm not as critical of it. Or I'll be like, I try to be a little bit more understanding because as being on the other side of that, it's like,
Well, this brings us to Michael Voris and Church Militant. Like, because I think they have a particular style that many people find totally off-putting. And many times I see what they post, like blood on the walls, and I'm like, oh my.
Little on the nose.
Little on the nose.
Like, I was at a bar when I got this text. Sorry, I'm going to stop. I don't know if it's
go for it
or not. But I got this text from Matt that had the picture.
Yeah, I got to see if I can find. Let me see if I can find this because I'm pretty sure it was actually a text message that I sent to you. Let's see here, Mike and Luke. Here we go.
Yeah.
So, I sent this image with. I feel like they're holding back. Yeah.
And I was at a bar for my birthday when I got that, and I was like,
"Kill young conservative males." Like, little on the nose. Anyway, sorry. Continue.
But it just how so like let's take that. A thing that I a lot of times have a lot of issues with, and I maybe I should be less critical. I don't know.
Or maybe the fact that you think you're allowed to be critical of them.
Yeah.
Has that made you more understanding and open to other people's criticisms? Like it's totally okay if you feel about me the way I feel about Michael Voris.
No, but I probably should be. That's a really good point.
Empathy, that's a tricky thing. Well, the thing with Michael Voris and I think criticism, or churchmilitant.tv, like let's expand it out to that. I think the wider thing is being on the receiving end of praise, of fan culture, right? That's a whole new thing for us, to have fans. To have people this is the weird thing about podcasts is it becomes a weekly conversation. And if you're listening to us for an hour and a half a week, you get to know our lives really, really well in this one-way street, right? And then you meet these people and like, oh my gosh, I know everything about your life. This is kind of awkward. And you have these funny conversations, but you realize like praise, fan culture, Patreon support, all these things, how that can feed into your ego. And then you look at how criticism and all that stuff can be good and healthy and rude and brutal and all these things. So I think that has tempered me being on the receiving end of both when I look out at other people, right? Especially independents. Because independents, like you took a wild step out to do this.
Yeah.
And it's paid off.
Well, I don't know yet. I mean, definitely the criticism hurts.
Yeah.
Like the first episode we did it live. Because I just saw Joe Rogan doing it live, and I thought, well, we could do it live. So we did it live, and the microphones weren't set properly. And the first thing I did is I'm like, hello, welcome to the Matt Fradd Show. And it was in the 0.3 second, and someone wrote 0.3 second ear rape. I'm like,
wow. My God.
But I can't help but laugh every time I think of that comment. I'm like, I'm so sorry. And then there was some background noise, and some of these things can sound cliche, but I did see a poster that said, if you don't want to be criticized, don't try anything new. And that is a cliche, but it is a really good point.
It's true.
And this is a new thing. And, I've paid this studio for 12 months to do this. And maybe after the 12th episode, I'm like, all right, so this just didn't catch on. Yeah. And that's okay.
But I do think it gives you a little bit more empathy for other people doing things.
Yeah.
Even things that you might completely disagree with.
That's right.
Their approach, Church Militant is a boomer response to church scandal, but it's done in an independent way. So it's kind of cool that it's this grassroots thing that came up and all this stuff. I don't like it because I think it builds rage and anger, that's the target response that they want. Look at these people. Look how horrible they are. But we're the pure ones. And I think it builds up too. This is the reason why I stopped watching Fox News, is because I think that they spread too much fear, uncertainty, and doubt, so that your response is constantly anger.
That's all news, isn't it?
Yeah, but some cultivate a lot more than others.
Right.
I mean, CNN did not cultivate anger every 5 seconds, right? And then MSNBC and Fox News, they cultivate that. Like, Rachel Maddow puts a big smile on it, right? And she tells jokes more than a Bill O'Reilly would. But she's cultivating a dismissive, angry attitude towards an entire, half of the country. Yeah. And so you start looking at this and hearing all this stuff, and you realize that for your own mental and emotional health.
That's right. I can see that.
You got to step back.
But what do you think of those who say that Michael Voris and Church Militant exist because people refuse to speak out?
Yeah.
I think it's a market correction if you really want to look. I mean, just through really cold eyes.
What do you mean by that? That's interesting.
So why do a lot of nonprofits exist? One reason is that when you look at the market, there's a thing that is wrong. Something happened, and you can have a nonprofit actually can help solve that.
Yep.
And I think if you look at the church in terms of as a market, I don't really like doing this, but I think this is just an example. It fits. There's a wrong here, and this is a natural response to that wrong. Mm-hmm. So it's a market a correction.
Yeah.
So and it just creates this whole industry
around
trying to combat heterodoxal at best.
Yeah.
Heretical at worst, or scandalous at worst, acts of people of church leadership. Who do they constantly go after? The bishops. Well, they're doing that because the bishops have really screwed things up. For a really long time.
And they don't talk. Bishops don't hold other bishops accountable. And this is one of the things that I see.
I loved your episode the other day with Lincioni.
Yeah.
He made this point.
Yeah, and the problem is that one bishop literally said to Patrick Lincioni, I don't criticize him because then he's going to start criticizing me. And it's that's what adults do when you're colleagues in the same field and, souls are on the line. Me and Luke have conversations with each other about stupid things that we might say on the show off the air, and hey, maybe you shouldn't have said it like that, or maybe you shouldn't have reacted that way. We have to make each other better.
Yeah. I for one am glad Michael Voris and Church Militant exist and are saying what they're saying. I think the problem becomes for people when they set up tent in that area, and this just becomes their life, where, as you say, it keeps stoking this anger, and there's no real outlet to do with it. But I actually appreciated your criticism, Luke, of Michael Voris and their commentary on Franciscan, because one of the things I said in my interview with him, for those who aren't aware, I did a whole hour-long video interview you can go watch. And I like Michael. He seems like a cool guy. I'd like to hang out with him. But one of the things I said was, look, maybe you don't like his style, and maybe that's a valid thing to criticize. But is what he's saying true or not? Or is what he's saying half true? Because if that's the case, then you should do the church a service, create a whole website devoted to exposing the lies and falsehoods of the vortex. Yeah. And that would be a good response. But one of the things you guys did was you actually pointed out that you disagreed with his journalisming, in that he contacted perhaps a student randomly and got...
Yeah, it was really weird. The whole thing was just this is not how journalism works. I mean, from my limited understanding of how journalism works, it just was very... Steubenville is the most Orthodox Catholic country... Catholic
country. It's
Catholic
its own
school
nation.
in the country. It is as right-wing as you can get, I think, for the most part. And I was just what is this? It was weird. It was really, and that's why also we went there. It's an important place. It's not without its faults. I'm but this isn't one of them. And it felt like it was more just, it felt a little bit Robespierre-ish, where it's just and then going towards we're on the same team here. We all love Jesus Christ.
But he was addressing something that was a serious issue. I mean,
but
you've got a professor literally assigning pornography to people.
But I don't think there was...
And blasphemous pornography at that.
But I think the difference is, it was... I don't disagree with that, but it was more attack, because there's been this thing that they've been starting to push towards, that is that the school has lost its orthodoxy. And I'm like, that's not going on.
That is not
and
going
like,
on.
and that's what I was trying to get. I was like, this is not of God. This is pride. Like, this is not good. Stop this. Because this is like, you're destroying something you're trying to destroy a thing that's good, because he has power.
He does have power.
And
do you think that the president of Franciscan would have come out and publicly apologized if Michael hadn't have picked up on it?
Well, so I think the other problem here is that there are elements. It's more than just, hey, this is inappropriate for college students to read. Because I think I read his article on First Things, and I agree with his rationale behind it.
Okay.
I mean, his rationale is, listen, we have these Catholic authors that we read from French. You know, this is a class of 5 students. It's a graduate class, and it's like we have these like 6 authors, and 3 are devout Roman Catholics, and 3 are ex-Catholics, and this is how they treat the sacred and profane and life. And so the whole idea was to juxtapose the good and the bad. And he says, you know, he nervous about introducing this book. He introduces this book, and people have, his former students, whenever they, you know, in this tiny little class, whenever they read this one author who has all this horrible stuff to say, they say it reaffirmed their Catholic faith, because look at how evil you get when you detach, right?
That was the point he was trying to make.
That was the point. That was the whole point was, and so he said, listen, okay, fine, I made an error looking at all this feedback, okay, because I guess, you know, you can become insular, because he was the head of the department and all this stuff, that you can pick books that maybe you shouldn't have.
Yeah.
Right? And so I think to say, like, would the president of Franciscan have responded? No, because it wouldn't have been an issue, because you can trust your faculty, and maybe you didn't know every single book.
You don't have to micromanage your professors.
Right, but then it becomes an issue, so you have to respond.
Yeah.
And so I don't think it's fair when people are like, well, until the donors started threatening to take away money. It's like, yeah, because then it became a problem. It wasn't necessarily
That's interesting,
a
too,
problem.
that it was a graduate class, because when I heard that, I just suspected it was like these 18-year-olds coming
this
in.
This is not intro to literature.
Right.
This is a grad school class, and it's more a seminar style, right? So these are kids who are, I mean, here's the deal. Are you only going to read devout Roman, are you only going to read devout Roman Catholics?
But
right?
That wouldn't be Michael's argument, right? The point isn't that you shouldn't be reading things that contain immorality in them. That's not his argument. Because if that were the case, you shouldn't read the Bible.
Right.
The death of the Son of God, the crucifixion of him was the most morally abhorrent thing that's ever took place. The point is pornography intrinsically evil? Was that an example of it? If it was, then you would be wrong to subject that to your students.
Right. Yeah. Fair enough.
Like, there's ways to inculcate people, or to not inculcate.
And I think he would probably say, and now I am gladly doing the catching foxes thing where I'm putting words in everyone else's mouth.
Okay.
But I think he would say this is not necessarily pornographic. It's not pornography. Like, you're not reading it for the sake of sexual arousal.
Okay.
Even though it's describing sexual things.
Okay.
Right. But I'm not Professor Lewis or whatever.
I guess, like...
I suppose that
But Michael Vor's interviewed a student, or I think half the professors are no longer Orthodox.
Yeah, that's what you criticized. Someone said half the professors aren't Orthodox.
Yeah.
I don't think Church Militant mentioned who that was.
No, this was a student that was
It was a student, yeah.
And it's like-
that there seems like a legitimate criticism to launch a Church Militant and say you can't just cite an anomalous, presumably, unnamed student and indict half the faculty.
Well, and then also it goes back to this thing of like, because I think it comes from a place of like they're scared, because this was a school that for 3 to 4 decades held the fort down in terms of orthodoxy.
Yeah.
When Catholic colleges ran amok because of the Land O'Lakes
agreement,
document, which look whose name is on there.
Whose name is on there?
McCarrick.
Teddy. So.
Uncle Ted.
Yeah, and so
it's actually how we signed it. We should have known.
It was very confusing.
Oh man,
Land O'Lakes was actually the name of his beach house. It was crazy.
and it's like, what if that goes wrong? Oh my gosh, all is lost. Because that is a school that has profoundly changed the Catholic landscape in the country. I mean, and so there's to jump from this thing happened in a grad school
and
class,
just to go for the jugular.
exactly.
But this is fear, uncertainty, and doubt. Oh my gosh, we're afraid that Father Sheridan is destroying Franciscan. Who knows what the future of Franciscan? I doubt they're even Orthodox anymore. 50% of the professors don't even worship Jesus anymore, or whatever. That's fear, uncertainty, and doubt. And it's like, oh my God, what am I going to do? And so the last thing I would say is, in terms of that, there weren't specific examples of how the university is losing its orthodoxy in a clear way. It's like, this is among the trend of things. I would say that when we were students, of the student body on their own, you probably couldn't find Democrats. Like there was a college Democrat group.
I remember one girl.
Yeah, and they were all incredibly pro-life.
Yeah.
You know, like all of the things that you want out of a Catholic Democrat, right? But they were like pro-union, you know, or whatever it was at the time. And so the culture of the student body was far more Republican conservative. This is George W. Bush, this is Iraq war time.
Yep.
You know, all that stuff where there was a lot of circling the wagons. Now I think high school students are far more leftist progressive because that's the culture that they're kind of raised in. And so when that student body enters into Franciscan,
That's a good point.
you have a shift. You will have a change in tone. Just like right before we came there was a huge amount of homeschool families where students came. And it comes in waves, right? You get the public school kids who were converted at a Stu Mill Youth Conference because they heard you speak.
Those are the ones with the biggest Marian chains.
I
and the sevenfold scapulars and things.
I got the brown scapula, the white scapula, the blue. Okay, but then there is the homeschool way, where a lot of homeschool families will send they send them to Christendom and St. Thomas and Franciscan and a couple others. But like Franciscan was one of the places, even though it's charismatic and most homeschoolers aren't. So they would send their kids there, and when there's a majority of that culture coming in, it affects the culture of the campus for years. And I think that's another problem because most of the professors are the same professors.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, it's not like Professor Cirilla, who writes on 1 Peter 5, is a crazy liberal, or whatever. So,
I mean, it was compared to other people that I know who took history classes, mine were the most right-wing conservative things you could imagine. I mean, it's insane comparing like my experience of college to that of my wife's who went to a state school out in Texas. I mean, and it's been 15 years now. But
Luke had this horrible, horrible realization. He said, we, in 14 years, will be 50 years old. 14 years ago, we graduated from Franciscan.
Right. Do the
and
math.
it's like, oh no.
Oh wow, yeah.
Isn't that a terrible?
All things are
terrible-
fleeting.
That's right.
Vanity.
Vanity of vanities. Chasing after
One of the things I was texting you, Luke, about recently was just this idea that we're in this uncertain, turbulent time in the church, and we're looking for a scapegoat. We're looking for somebody who has to take the fall for this.
Yeah.
When it became apparent that Pope Francis wasn't going to address the Vigano letter, and still plans not to, some of us wanted him to take the fall. We just needed somebody, and I think I see this in the harsh criticisms of Bishop Robert Barron in his interview with Ben Shapiro.
Yeah.
Even though I think he could have done a better job, I think the way people went after him with knives out was kind of illustrative that we're in this time where somebody has to go down to make things, to regulate things again. And I just wanted to talk about that.
I mean, that's Bishop Barron's scapegoating. Yeah.
Do you think that's because the culture is so unbalanced and there's such a lack of real goodness that people feel the injustice of that?
I think
and they want to go at like they demand they're trying to find
a foothold.
Justice, or like something like there's something wrong here. We're we need to fix this.
Some kind of gravity. I think that it used to be that we would look to Rome to clarify the confusion of our parishes. You know, all this crazy crap going on. At least we've got John Paul II. And we live in this pro-death culture, but we know that Pope John Paul II's for us, and Pope Benedict's Catholic and for us. Even if we've got these crazy priests in individual parishes who might be doing illicit things. But whereas we used to look to Rome to justify the confusion of our parishes, I feel like we now have to look to our Orthodox parishes to clarify the confusion of Rome.
Yeah.
And so there's this sort of vertigo that we're experiencing, and I think we're looking for a place to set our feet in, a foothold, so that we can feel more stable in this sort of turbulent time.
And I think the temptation is to make celebrities. And I think the temptation is to make villains, or superheroes and villains. And we want this pure, like, Star Wars-esque. The guy, he's Darth Vader, he's a bad guy, right? He's Luke Skywalker. But even that was nuanced. Darth Vader converted at the end. But we have this image, so if you think that that villain is Michael Vorse, you think that villain is Pope Francis, we are such absolutists. Dr. Hahn used to always say the sin of the modern era is we absolutize the relative and we relativize the absolute. And so we take things that aren't absolutes and we say, oh, no, I'm going to put my tent pole right here and this is going to define. because we need to understand the world. We need.
I felt for a while now that people do this in regards to particular devotions.
Yeah.
So the Catholic Church does not say that you must pray the Holy Rosary every day. But I feel like that's a place that we can sort of stake our peg and say, this is going to be the thing, because this is the thing that's unchanging, and I'm going to make this everything, and I'm going to demand of everybody else, if they want to be seen as an Orthodox Catholic and to be an Orthodox Catholic, that they must pray in this way and in this particular way.
Yeah.
And I'm not picking
if your
on
rosary isn't...
Not picking on the rosary. I love the rosary.
No, but
Really? Tell us about your love of the rosary.
I just wrote a book on the rosary, yeah.
I got a free copy of it.
Did you? Good.
I did. It actually is awesome.
Yeah.
I'll plug that.
Thank
it's
you.
A good book. It's a good
well,
book.
I thought there was only 8,000 available. We needed one more book on the rosary. Anyway, but yeah.
No, that's so true, because you look at devotions, you look at schools of theology, and you have people who say, unless it's Thomas Aquinas, it is heterodox or suspect. So you have an Augustinian like Pope Benedict who doesn't contradict Thomas Aquinas or, Garrigou Lagrange. He doesn't contradict him, but at the same time, he's not quoting him, and therefore dismiss. And I think that is insane, as if only one school of thought. And I recorded Aeterni Patris for you for the audiobook. I know what the church says.
Yeah.
And I've named my kid Thomas because I love St. Thomas Aquinas and Thomism.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you have to
Turns out he's not inerrant.
It turns out he is not the Pope.
Yeah.
He was not St. Peter. He is not Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
And so there is this element where I think it's a safety thing. I think it's like...
Because, I speak about it because I experience it. I'm not pointing my finger at other people and saying, look at them. I see it in myself. Like, I tend to lean, if you want to use left and right, and you want to use them in the negative sense, I tend to lean right. Like, I would tend to be the person who becomes a traditionalist, perhaps in the negative sense, and would have a temptation of looking down on other things, right? Yeah. So because I feel that temptation, I'm constantly tugging away from it. I would never be like, homosexual marriage is totally cool, and identity politics, and I would never feel the temptation to go that way, and so I don't pull back away from that. So I think sometimes it sounds like I'm speaking against the right in the Catholic sense because I feel the temptation towards it.
Yeah. No,
I don't know if that makes any sense.
Luke said really early in our podcast, he said, the thing that makes me mad about church militant is that I agree with 90% of what they say. Yeah. And it's true. It's not that. I think it's great that we have, crazy confusion around solid church teaching that, was very clear during the reign of JP2 and Benedict. And now we're like, wait, what? What do these comments in the airplane mean? Like, I defended Pope Francis so much, especially with the comments in the airplane, because I thought, this is what we want. We want an accessible Pope who's not measured. I mean, our podcast is a messy podcast, and that's Pope Francis' favorite word to describe himself, is messy, right? A prophet makes a mess or whatever. And it's like, the Pope is messy and not accurate, but he's accessible, and he's down to earth. Whereas Benedict was probably the least accessible of the recent popes, but you could hang your coat on every word that came out of his mouth because it was measured, it was weighted, it was careful. And Pope Francis is not careful.
But in what you said there about Benedict not being accessible, I think I understand what you mean. And yet I think he was more in touch with young people than say the boomer generation thought. I remember sitting down with a priest and he was telling me how out of touch Pope Benedict is with the youth because he wants to reinstitute all of this Latin and incense. And I'm like, no, you're out of touch. Yeah. Oh, you don't know. Like, us young people, we were raised as orphans. We don't know our spiritual heritage, and we would actually like some incense and some Latin and some chant. We find that more beautiful than felt banners and badly played 70s music.
Hey, joy.
What's that?
Down in my heart.
That's what those felt things used to say it in my parish. It'd say joy, like that.
Well, the funny thing is what you find with immigrants, like, I don't know about y'all, but...
Well, I happen to be an immigrant, so be careful.
Well, you're a first gen. You're a first gen immigrant. So you bring with yourself that cultural context that you came from, right? So if you think of someone who's coming from the old country, right? So my great-grandfather on both sides of my parents came over from Ireland about the same time, ended up in Philadelphia in Irish neighborhoods, right?
That's cool.
So all of their culture was preserved. Second generation, it was entirely lost. My grandparents, my parents are thoroughly American, whatever that means. We don't have heirlooms that we pass down. There's nothing of our Irish heritage that is communicated to us. And the funny thing is, I remember being like, I can't wait to go to Europe, to go to Ireland, to see where I come from. Because there's this understanding of your identity. And right now what we're finding with millennials is first generation immigrants are angry at at their children because they're losing the sense of the old country. We have a guy named Kevin, he's a big fan of the show, and he's like, yeah, I'm Vietnamese. My mom is always complaining, you don't understand your Vietnamese heritage and you don't understand this. And that's common for second generation. But the funny thing is, this time around, with millennials, third generation are saying, I want to move back home.
We're seeing that in the church too, aren't we?
That's
this
what I'm saying.
for
It's
tradition.
like, we're rootless cosmopolitans. We don't have roots. And then we're looking back and we're like, Latin and this has been happening for 1,000 years in this form, and now it's like, guess what, kids? You're gonna love this. And it's like
pizza and Coke masses.
And if you, but here's the deal: is like no kidding. But my parents, whenever I do, like when the Third Roman Missal came out, the English translation, I was at a group and I was the youngest person by about 40 years, and so I'm at this table at my parish with volunteers, and I said, the beauty of this new translation is it's going to help us jettison a lot of stupid stuff that people have been doing for the last 20, 30 years. I said, and the language is more precise with the Latin. And they looked at me and they were like horrified. Wow. And they were like, I hated the Latin Mass. We had to put the thing on my head and everything. You didn't understand what was going on. The priest didn't even talk to you and all this stuff. And so as I was talking, I said, listen, I think maybe you hated the Latin Mass. And at one point they were very patronizing. They were like, you're too young to understand. I was like, actually, when I was in high school, I used to drive 45 minutes to go to a Latin Mass by myself. My parents hated it. I would go by myself all the time. And there was all these young people there. And she would say, and so I said, I think you hate it because you were 6 when it changed. Yeah. But we choose this. And for her, they didn't even understand, this was fascinating to me, that we belong to the Latin or Roman Church. Like, they don't understand what the Eastern Catholic Church is, the Western understanding of the Latin Church. And so by having a more precise Latin translation, they were like, what is that? I don't even know what that means.
Well, and I think it's also important to understand that there's a reason why a lot of this stuff did to change at that point in time. So this is an example I always go to. But like Aaron's dad tells the story of how when, as a kid, he was terrified of God. I mean, he was terrified of going to hell, which there's something that's good about being scared of going to hell, but there's a difference between that and like,
fear.
Then it becomes
oh my gosh.
Yeah.
And I remember he said a thing about how he was angry when he learned that God really loved him. When he understood that, he was so upset because he spent so much of his life being terrified of God. And I think that it's important to remember that, like, a lot of these, like a lot of the boomers or like older up generation, the church got stiff and it became like math, and it just became very like, I don't know if a resounding gong is the right term, but there was like this staleness to it, I think.
I think it is important that we try and understand where people are coming from who criticize the Latin Mass. I think that's right, because I went for a drive with an older priest he worked in a seminary, and he was really turned off by those seminarians who wanted to wear the big Roman collar and who liked the frills and liked the incense cassock and but and instead of just dismissing him, I really tried to listen to where he was coming from, and I actually felt he was actually really listening to where I was coming from too, and it was kind of nice. Do you think we're destined to an inevitable back and forth of the pendulum swing then?
So this is called the law of undulation. Have you ever heard that phrase?
I have heard it. I don't know what it means.
I almost said Matt Fradd. C.S. Lewis, very similar.
You made it.
he called it that when I think it was a Mere Christianity or something, and he's referencing how, like in the book of Judges, right, there's the cycle where they obey God, they prosper, prosperity leads to arrogance, arrogance leads to indulgence, then they break the law, then God punishes them, and it's this constant cycle. And C.S. Lewis points out that oftentimes the way human beings learn, because we're not eternal, we're in time, we don't just have this exponential curve of growth and holiness and learning. It's this. It's like fits and starts and stuff. And I do think there is something important about understanding like stages of life. There's a reason why older people they hate change. They hate change as you get older because you see the value in institutions.
I see that in my own life, hating change.
Right.
Yeah.
But the younger you are, you hate the staticness of everything. And so when you throw out an understanding of the institutions that have gone before you. I remember George Weigel made this comment. It's very this notion aggiornamento, right? Like we need to get rid of all the ornamentation of the medieval church so that the church can once again, from her essence, speak to the culture today, without carrying all this modern or medieval cruft with her, right? And this guy said something that was very powerful. He said, okay, let's say you get rid of all the secondary things that are inessential. Do you know where the essential and the inessential begins and ends? And he said, and how do you not know which secondary thing was developed in the Middle Ages to protect the primary thing? Like the doctrines of Mary.
That's what we've seen.
Mary isn't essential to the salvific event of Jesus Christ per se, but everything we believe about Mary safeguards what we believe about Jesus, right? His incarnation, all that stuff. And so it's similar to that, like what has grown up in the medieval church.
It's like if you throw out the dogma of Mary as Theotokos, then who is Jesus if she's not the mother of God?
Yeah, I mean, St. Paul's very clear. Born at the appointed time, born of a woman, right? And so if you discard her, you're having a de-incarnational faith.
That's interesting,
Yeah, and I think we just go back and forth. And I think sometimes when you get locked in a particular worldview, like scholasticism in the 1800s and the 1900s, Balthasar famously called it sawdust Thomism. Because you were just memorizing these formulas. But when Thomas wrote the Summa, at least if you understand it from Peter Kreeft's understanding, it was like a Platonic dialogue in a different format. It was like, here's objections, here's the thesis, here's the response to the objections. So you could come along today and add new objections and new responses, and he's trying to get at the core of what we believe. But when you just memorize this and regurgitate this, it becomes lifeless because it gets detached from its... When you don't do what Thomas did, which was be steeped in the Fathers and Scripture, and you just study Thomas and Thomas's commentators, that's where it becomes lifeless. And so I love the Res Source movement of Vatican II, of like, let's go back to Thomas and not just read later Thomists. Let's go back to the Church Fathers and not just read later commentary on the Church Fathers. Let's go back to the Bible instead of reading, 18th century commentary on the Bible. But also, let's not get rid of those things either. I always tell people who are swinging left or whatever you want to call it, that Vatican II had footnotes. It referenced things that actually came before Vatican II, and you need to understand those things if you're going to understand Vatican II.
I think one of the reasons we're in this turbulent time, of course, is because of the internet and social media. And Luke, you've spoken a lot about this in really raw and awesome ways. So I just wanted to begin touching upon that. Twitter, Instagram, Facebook.
So,
Raw.
This is the speaking dinosaur. You may speak if you're holding it.
It's an invitational model.
Well, I feel. So I think, we're in a period right now where it's great because, like, everyone has a voice, and it's terrible because everyone has a voice.
I love it.
Like, if you think, like,
that's excellent.
The mob is good, I invite you to study the French Revolution, and like what happened, because like groupthink is so interesting, and there's like a culture and things happen, and this weird kind of going back to I think kind of to tie in both things of this whole idea of like market correction. So you cannot deny the fact that America has a racist past. I mean, we were just doing like a photo shoot the other day, and we were on a bus, and it said on the back part, "Colors in the back," and it's like,
no colors beyond this point. And you're like,
like that was
let's
the thing.
turn this sign down for a photo shoot.
Good way of talking your way out of that one if that went.
Right? So we were just highlighting the struggle. I know. It's very historic. You were smiling.
And then so you could say that being woke right now is a response to that. But the hard part about it is when you look at how Twitter works, for example, I'm convinced that their algorithm, this is my a conspiracy hat on, but it's meant to incite this. So that you see people, I had people about a thing that I'm writing about, they respond to a thing you wrote 3 to 4 days ago, which is like a thought that you have, but they see it on their timeline right then. Yeah. So they think it's something you're saying in the moment about things that are going on right now. And if the conversation has changed, they respond to it as if you're being ignorant or you're,
Who's responding to it?
Like people
Anyone
who
who
see
sees
it,
your tweets,
people who,
right?
who see your tweet. And
I get it. Yep.
It's weird because they're having a conversation with you from 3 to 4 days ago, but
they're seeing
perhaps
it's
information has
now.
changed.
Yeah.
And so they think your response is in light, or they go, and it gets very, and I'm almost convinced they understand this, and they want to foster this.
It would make good business sense, wouldn't it?
Exactly. And now you have this mob mentality of what happens when anyone, and this is kind of what I mean about that whole market correction thing, or like kind of do things always go back and forth, where it is a witch hunt. The thing about like Liam Neeson, when he said the thing about he wanted to like beat up a black guy, and it's like, what's horrible, but what was the context of this? Why is the like immediate thing is to then just jump and say he's done now, he's outcast. Yeah. His head has been chopped off. In essence, it's basically the like I'm a French Revolution, and
the more I see this crazy stuff happening, the more I'm happy to be a small fry in the internet world.
Yeah,
I've
totally.
got 13,000 followers on YouTube. Like that's good. I don't need to stick my head above and
again, like I'm not saying that like it's tough because I feel like now I feel this weird need to say I don't agree with what he said. But like
I'm sure
he
doesn't agree with what he said.
It just I was like, are we just gonna do this every time?
He seemed to be being unnecessarily vulnerable. Like this was an event from his past. There was no way you could utter that and it not be used against him. It seems like something that may have been useful to bring up over a pint with a trusted friend or with a therapist, but not to air before everybody. And now we air everything before everybody.
And that I think is another element of the conversation within the Catholic context is everything is immediate response. And we're training ourselves on that. Like we
do this, and I get really worried about it at times. That
we live a public life. We respond from sound bites. We don't. That's why podcasting is such a great medium, because you can sit and talk about.
Well, and people can't comment in real time on podcasts like they can on videos. Like I've been really surprised at how much hate I've gotten as my YouTube channel has begun to take off, because people watch it and they say something really bad about me. But you can't do that if you're listening to my podcast. There's nowhere to type it.
So I probably won't read the comments to this. Yes, I will. But it's weird.
And I'll hate myself.
But here's the weird part about all
That's
this.
why donuts exist.
Is everyone right? Everyone talks about this. You hear this from people who are on the left, who are on the right. They're all like, "This is really bad," but no one's doing anything.
Except pointing at it.
And I don't know what, but
what have you done? Because I understand that you've changed the way you've used social media because of some of this. Is that right or no?
A bit.
The law of undulation. Luke goes right back to where he started.
I've really tried to, kind of. I had a point where after the whole Covington Catholic, I was like, I'm done.
Yeah.
I'm done. I can't deal being corrected by 30 people after I say anything that they don't agree with. This is
Who can, especially from 30 strangers?
Exactly.
Even if they're all right, to have 30 strangers correct you that you don't,
and I think so. For me, I've tried to back out. I was like, I think I'm done, and I was gonna have a friend just like run our account.
Yeah.
And then I've kind of jived back into it a little bit, but I have a weird detachment with it now.
It's supposed to be.
It reminds me of my parents who would watch the news at 7 p.m. every single night, and when I would be like, "Why are you doing this?" they would put it in a positive light. They'd say, you need to know what's going on in the world.
Yeah.
And I thought, that's not why you're watching this. Or the more I've reflected upon it, I'm like, that's not why people watch the news.
Squirrels on jet skis. You don't need to know about a squirrel on a jet ski.
Yeah. We're watching this for entertainment, and I think that social media is less like a news feed and more like a poker machine. It's just this addictive thing. And so for that reason, I'm so proud of myself. I'm very proud of myself for very few things, so that I have to talk about the ones that I'm proud of. It's been about 7 months now that I haven't had access to my social media. I gave it to Kiernan Doyle. I'm not sure if you know him. He used to work for LifeTin. Awesome dude.
Oh, nice.
We're gonna do a shout out to him. But anyway, he just took over my social media. And I said to him, I need you to change my passwords because I know myself and I have no self-control.
Yeah.
Wow,
so 7 months ago, he changed my passwords and I haven't been on. And at first, it was like missing an arm. But then the more I've done.
It's funny because I've never been that way when it comes to social media. I got a little bit into that on Facebook when I would have a post that would just blow up. And I'm like, whoa, 7,000 people have liked this stuff.
So I just want to show people this, creatushouse.com.
I like that font.
Robert, if you could throw that up. This is the guy, Kiernan. Not only is he attractive, he's also just super awesome. So if there's people out there who are like me and got super fed up with social media and you want somebody to just kind of take it over, because it's not feasible for everybody just to totally drop out. I mean, some of us have something we're trying to shill, like try to sell stuff and let people know about
Buy
it.
my book.
Yeah,
Buy my book.
Patreon.com/CF.
So for that reason, people could.
It was the wrong camera, Luke. He just winked at the wrong camera. That's awesome.
Well, no one will know until you said it.
No, but that's really cool that the people who really. And I think
people should check that out.
Also, to have
it's
a person,
made my life so much better.
To have a person be able to approach it from an academic, but like a detached standpoint.
Yeah,
like,
definitely. So when
Facebook
people
is evil. Like, people need to understand Facebook as an organization is a bad organization.
Tell us why.
They are doing so much data mining on
because
all your
Facebook is
information.
evil is going to be one of the cutout videos.
Yes.
Tell us why.
Okay, I mean, they set up, so within the App Store, you can sideload apps instead of downloading apps. Businesses can apply.
What does that mean?
So businesses can apply for enterprise apps that are only used in-house. So you have to get these special certificates, these developer certificates, that allow you to put an app on your phone that's not widely distributed. So Facebook and Google did this too, but Facebook was the key one. They would abuse their enterprise certificates in order to farm these apps to children as young as 13. And they would put them on their phone, and it was a VPN, a virtual private network. And it recorded every single thing you went to on the internet with your phone. So it created basically a tunnel to Facebook servers and from their servers to the internet so they could track everything you're doing.
That's insane.
Now, why is that evil? I'm sure that's in their terms of agreement.
No, it's not. Number one, it violates Apple's terms of agreement.
Really?
You are not allowed. It's like, think of like a company that wants to manage like their warehouse.
Yeah.
They don't want an app on the App Store that anyone can get. So they have these enterprise things that's like, yes, you can have this. So that's kind of what the point is. So Apple found out that they were doing this and rejected Facebook's certificate and shut Facebook down completely, kicked out all of their enterprise apps. So every single, and they probably have like dozens, right? So we don't think about this because it's not in the App Store, but Facebook or Apple is deadly serious about your privacy because that's how they kind of get a leverage up on Google and all that other stuff.
Yeah.
And so they really worked it. They have to protect their brand of privacy. And so you find out that Facebook, they would do things like they would have an inaudible sound being played constantly so that your app was always running in the background. Because do you do this with your iPhone? Like you swipe away apps?
Yeah.
You don't ever have to do that.
Yeah,
People
why am I doing that? Like it's slowing down my phone.
Now, if you have a bad app, people do that because you can. But what Facebook was doing was it would play an inaudible sound constantly so that its app was always running at full speed in the background. And then they were found out. And it was a bug. And it's like, really, it's a bug going for like 12 months, right? So these things happen.
And were they recording and
your conversation? They weren't recording you. They were just keeping their app always loaded. And just doing all these practices that literally, I mean, think about how it kills your battery. Facebook was a horrible battery hog and all this stuff. So they do all of these things. They were selling data that they shouldn't have to third parties. A big scandal. They're getting fined.
Can I interject really quick?
Yeah.
I have to pee so bad.
Yeah. How was your urination?
Oh, it was such a relief. I guarantee you there were so many comments on YouTube like, why is a bald fat guy getting so uncomfortable and just like keep going like this with a dinosaur? That's weird. Well, kids, he had to pee really badly.
Bear down. Gomer's on a tear.
I was like, as soon as I was like, oh no, I know where this is going to go. And I was like legitimately like, I was like, okay, Luke, you're an adult. You can hold it at a point where it's like, no, your body's like, no, you can't, man.
Especially,
no, you can't.
You're an older adult.
You've had a ton of coffee and a lot of water.
Especially because at the start of this, I'm like, I'm really hoping to break the 3-hour barrier.
I know, and I was
and so
totally
you're
all
looking
about
at that clock, man, like, no.
Like, hey, Gomer, talk about Facebook now. Oh no, he's getting his chance to talk about tech stuff.
Hey, I had a question about Facebook to wrap this neat segment up. Are they on the Apple Store?
So the Facebook app is, and then they are working with Apple to get all their other things back up. And Google did the same thing. A bunch of companies got outed in this kind of thing. But it's true.
The whole point is just to like keep you engaged. Like you are the product.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Like it's your data. And there's a part of me that is okay with that in the sense that I want to see other things that I'm interested in. I don't mind if like information on like my habits get sent to people. If I am aware that it's going on.
But it's
like what does that look like in a post-Christian culture? It looks dangerous.
You're an object, you're a commodity. And now your information is a commodity. It's been commoditized, your buying habits, all this stuff.
Yeah.
So the dangerous thing is what we're talking about earlier with like, it's addictive because it's designed that way. Because shareholders want to see two major metrics on a social media platform. They want to see monthly users that are actually using the product, not just signups or whatever, and they want to see time engaged, right? Every website, that was a big thing. Like the average person on NewYorkTimes.com spends 11 minutes reading articles. They track every inch of that, right? And so Facebook isn't competing with other social media networks. They're competing with everything else you do on your phone. So what they want to do is every group does this. This is why there's a heart and a like and a dislike and a whatever on everything. It's all built around the slot machine.
I'm being red-pilled.
Yeah,
No,
So
totally.
I mean, the slot machine.
Explain it in a like Michael Scott. How would you explain this to me if I was 5?
Breaking it down Barney style. The idea is it's not just earning a reward that keeps people engaged. It's random, intermittent rewards. So you're pulling the handle over and over again. You get 7-7 bar, 7-7 cherry, 7. Oh, if I just keep going, oh my gosh, I won. So you have this addictive impulse that grows because of the randomness of the reward. So you take a game like Clash of Clans, right? It's this fun pay to play, pay to win kind of game. But you build these things for 12 hours, and all of a sudden, one day you log on, and there's a special prize, and you open it, all of a sudden you can build your armies 10 days earlier, or you go on Facebook, and for Facebook, it's the algorithm is structured around likes, right? So you go and you make a post, and you want to see how many of your friends like it, and you go, and you're just habitually attached to it. But then all of a sudden, they're like, well, we need to autoplay video. So you go on, and now they're pushing, everyone needs to get closed captioning on everything, so that the auto-playing video, so it draws your eye to it, and just because you scroll it, and they count that as a view. So then they can tell their investors, guess what? We had 20,000 hours of video consumed because it just autoplays. But then, where's more of that intermittent reward? You open it up, and it's like, 12 years ago, you and Luke had this photo. We value our patrons or our friends' memories. No, that's intermittent reward. Because then you get that little dopamine hit, you get a little nostalgia. I do this all the time.
Intermittent reward as opposed to every time you log on.
Yeah.
It's just out of nowhere. Here's the thing.
Element of surprise makes it addictive.
I see.
Element of surprise makes it addictive.
Because they want you there. They have engineers whose their whole job is to keep you there. And going back to when we talked about Twitter earlier, how I think that their like algorithm now, it incites all of this arguing and all of this like echo chamber stuff because it keeps you there. Like what's probably the worst and the best thing to ever happen to them was when
Trump became president.
Yeah, right. I think it was the whole like Egyptian revolution thing, and people started to like
Arab
use
Spring.
Arab Spring. This is 2010,
What is this?
11. People used Twitter. Do you want to try to explain it really quick?
The 30 second.
You have 30 seconds.
The Arab Spring was a series of movements that happened throughout the Mediterranean rim of Arab countries where they were trying to overthrow their military dictatorship. So you have Tunisia, Egypt, all this stuff. And it's called the Arab Uprising or the Arab Spring. And it became huge through Twitter and Facebook were the two catalysts.
And that's what like they use, especially Twitter, to do that. And I think it was very like out of nowhere when it happened. Like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna use this thing to cause a political revolution.
Yeah.
And I imagine Twitter went $signs because they saw like what it could be used for if they could find a way to get people to interact to call these social upheaval, which if it happens naturally, there could be a really cool thing that happens with that. And like I think that was amazing. But then what happens when they're trying to create that?
Yeah. But I mean, think about this. They want your money. They want wealthy Westerners' money. So the addictive nature is what they need to cultivate, right? Netflix is competing not just with YouTube, but they recently said this in their investor thing, with anything that takes your eyeballs away from Netflix, right?
Yeah.
So what do? They shorten the amount of time for the next video to play so that you have to actually intervene to not binge watch.
I've even noticed you drag your cursor over a video, it starts playing.
Yeah.
And there's very few places on the screen where you can rest it without something playing.
And
that's all
and if you like real art and if you want to view those things as art. So I love Mad Men. I adore that show. And
I've never watched it.
It really bothers me I mean, I don't know if I would recommend it, but
so good.
when the end of it, they play over the
Here
song.
comes the hate mail.
No, because
Every Catholic should watch Mad Men.
well, actually, no, I don't think so.
Name of the next clip.
Because so at the very end of Mad Men, they always like have a song that kind of like from that era, or not at times, that ties in with like the show. And the good thing about that part of when you like have when you like have the credits, if you want to judge a really good film, see how long see how long people have to stay during that part. They have to think about what just happened. It allows people time to process, which goes back to that ability to like understand what really is going on here. They don't want that. They just want you to just consume and consume, and it's the act of doing it is more important than the understanding.
But then you have Netflix in the pro side of it, enabling all of these independent things to have access to
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
For the
you have the Matt Fradd show
That's
being
true.
possible
On
because
YouTube,
and iTunes exist to connect podcasts with an audience.
I mean, we're here because of like we were able. I mean, things
right.
we've spread through Twitter, through
the annihilation,
from
annihilation of institutional gatekeepers allows a democratic access to all these platforms.
Well, and it's like
but at the same time, what you said, right? It's like, yeah, we all have access. Boo, we all have access, right? So. Yeah.
And it gets weird too because like now there's this thing where what am I trying to say here? That like we've thought a lot about, do we partner with other companies about with what we're doing? Do we ever want to like sell our podcast? And I'm kind of like, why? Yeah, they kind of need us more than we need them. We have millennials, but we get like your show. I would imagine is probably the exact same thing. We get who everyone wants. We don't have the 3-to-1 girl to guy like ratio. We've got half and half.
Yeah.
It's half girls, half guys.
To give you an example, I had somebody contact me and ask me if I would ever consider having this show on EWTN. Now, I don't think anyone officially from EWTN asked that question, to be clear, but someone in that orbit. And I just thought, no, why would I do that?
Yeah, because it comes with constraints that the democratization of the internet allows us to completely bypass. We can have creative people creating the show that they want. The more financial success you have, the more, in a lot of ways, the more freedom you have to create. Like Joe Rogan, being a successful comedian and someone on, NBC having a show and ABC and all that stuff, he's able to do the Joe Rogan show only because he was a success.
Yeah.
Right? But now, at the same time, you find that you can have these small YouTubers create these. We were just talking about our buddy's their daughter watches these people play with dolls. Adults play with dolls.
Yeah.
But they record 10 to 14 hours of doll playing content a day to produce one video. But they make probably $80,000 to $200,000 a month doing that. And so it enables access, it enables all sorts of stuff, but it comes with its own problems.
I think it's not by accident that you would never see a Catholic video get that large. I think there is. YouTube isn't interested in driving people to
that's interesting.
People who's full out of step with secular dogma.
Have you seen that with your show and with stuff that you're trying to do? Because you have a massive audience.
I mean, it's all relative, isn't it?
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Yeah.
No matter how big you are, you're always thinking it's not big enough. I'm kind of getting to the point now where I want to tell people to turn off my podcast because I don't think we spend enough time in silence. So here's the question I wanted to ask you on the heels of this conversation about social media. And this sounds dramatic, but I mean it. Mm-hmm. What is social media and modern technology doing to our humanity? Mm-hmm. That's the first question. Mm-hmm. I then want to talk about how is that impeding man's ability to receive the proclamation of the gospel? So first of all, what's it doing to our humanity?
I think it's keeping us occupied as opposed to, I don't know if even engaged is the right word.
That's very interesting.
Because you're just, you're not really, and this is the problem with, not to go too much down this rabbit hole, but the whole, Balthasar's idea of the anima technica vacua, if I'm pronouncing that right.
For those who aren't aware, what does that mean?
So it's half a minute.
We're timing you.
Yeah, he's the best at this stuff. So
the more technology encroaches in our everyday life, the more it creates. We turn to it to make us feel complete and feel happy and feel human, but it's actually creating a vacuum within our hearts. So you have this full out desire to sell yourself online, but it's crippling your development as a human person, community.
Action is more important than understanding. standing, and it's ultimately the rift between grace and nature, and what does that look like on the day-to-day life.
Perfect example of this is young girls in America, at least, used to have a culture where they were diaries. Dear diary, blah, 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 and you have a little lock and you lock it. This one feminist author I was reading, she said, look at how women all over America grew up reflecting.
Yeah, introspective.
At the end of the day, dear diary, I kissed the boy today and it was crazy, you know, like whatever. But they're processing their emotions. Now with Instagram, they document, and then they move on, and they live for people to like, and then they never think about it again. And she said, I'm afraid of what that's doing to our young girls growing up in an environment where self-reflection is never a part of their day.
That was an excellent distinction you just made there. I hadn't thought of that before. Yeah. Occupied versus engaged.
Yeah, because we care more about, like the tool. So like that's the part of the like ATV where things get weird. It is the techne, the tool, how that's just empty, and there isn't anything there.
Yeah, the tool shapes you, not just we shape.
And we don't have anything else going on with our life. There is no God now. We've basically got rid of God. Yeah. We replaced him with man.
We've placated our desire.
Yeah. That fell apart at the end of the Second World War.
Yeah.
So now it's like, well, let's just get engaged with this stuff that we have. We have
and
cool
call
toys.
Progress.
Yeah.
You know, and you have right on that line, you have Pope John Paul II talking about how in Love and Responsibility, how we so often replace virtue with technique or technological.
That's Cosmopolitan magazine.
Yeah. Yes, exactly.
102 ways.
Exactly.
Yeah.
There's no love.
Yeah. In terms of chastity, I thought this was a brilliant comment, and I think it might have been Chris Stefanik was the first place I heard it. But he said, you know, or maybe Jason Everett, but we've replaced love. When you have a sexual relationship without love and commitment, what do you have? You have technique. And so people are rated on how much pleasure they give me or how well they perform. And that's Cosmopolitan Magazine, you know, 100 ways to set the sheets on fire tonight, you know. Yeah. So it's nothing but technique. But then Luke applied it. One day he said the exact same quote, but it had nothing to do with chastity. And it's like, when you don't have Christ at the center of your life, when the love you have for God is not at the center, all you have left is technique. And so you can do that in the rad trad way, where you're obsessive with the external form.
Size of the candlesticks.
Exactly. Right. And all of that stuff. You can do it in the progressive liberal Catholic way of felt banners and, you know, whatever weirdo songs you introduce and all of that stuff. You can do it in all these different ways.
It's St. Paul, a form of religion while denying its power.
100%.
Exactly.
Right?
Like
the externals without the internals.
Like, stop and think about the terms that like we use as a culture about things that we like. This is everything.
Yeah.
This is so great that it's like
all the things,
all of the feels. It doesn't mean anything.
I have to say, I hate the phrase "feels," and I hate it because it patronizes like a legitimate human experience to a particular beautiful thing. It just trivializes it.
And that's the great insight of C.S. Lewis in Abolition of Man, where he talks about men without chests. Like we go from the head, right, of the understanding of the head as rational man, and then my urges, the stomach, right, like the desires, the base desires that I have. And he talks about how it's not just sentimentalism that we kind of have a cheapened version of it, but he talks about our emotions should be driving us. He said, but now we become men without chests. We're either rationalistic or we're driven by our urges. And we don't understand that emotions actually can touch reality. But if you're just shallow, you're just going for these quick emotional things. That's why I don't watch This Is Us. I refuse to watch This Is Us because everyone's just crying every week.
What is Friends?
With some Jack Johnson-like guitar.
Exactly. Like Friends, How I Met Your Mother, and I love those shows because it was like a reflection of my time. I remember being like how there were times when I would watch How I Met Your Mother and be like, holy crap, this is my weekend. I just went through all of this. But it's this weird micro dose of like your friends, of like having a life. And there was a point in time where it honestly became too painful to watch How I Met Your Mother because after I'm just moved away from all my friends just being like, it like was like painful. And I was like, not in a good way.
Yeah.
Just it was weird. It was really weird.
I think that it's like technology has become both the cause of our agitation and our comfort. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it causes agitation, but it also consoles that agitation.
Yeah.
So we're in this perpetual state of feeling agitated, and then we turn to technology to console the agitation.
Yeah. It's
a
Homer
drug.
Simpson's
That's what a
quote
drug
about
does.
alcohol.
That's what a drug is.
Beer,
Yeah.
the cause of and solution to all of life's problems. Homer Simpson said that.
So this is, and I've used this. I've used this before. This kind of story. So forgive me if you've heard it. But when I grew up, my parents, if you wanted to get in touch with them or me, you've heard me say this.
Yeah.
3 ways, like legit. That's all I can think of. You call them. They didn't have an answering machine, so you couldn't leave an answering machine. So if we weren't home, that's it. No answering machines. Yeah, Australia, baby. Well, there are, but my parents didn't have one. They'd take the phone off the hook for dinner and things like that. And, secondly, you could write a letter to us and post it to our house. And then the third way is you could go up the shops and see if we were there and be like, hey.
What does go up the shops
Oh,
mean?
so in Australia, like shops is like going to the store. I'm going up to the shops.
I know what you meant.
Okay.
Yeah.
Go up.
No, it's an Australian kind of expression, I think. Especially in a small country town. But that's it. Now, that isn't to say that people weren't, what's the phrase you use? Not engaged, but...
Occupied.
Occupied.
Yeah, it's not to say that people weren't just occupied in the numbing sense with not jigsaw puzzles.
No, but like,
crossword puzzles
there
and
are
things,
ways.
and sport and television.
Because
it's just that
solitaire
there's infinitely more ways to do that.
Well, and it's tough too because these things are designed to keep you there.
Yeah.
You know,
That's
and they're
right.
trying to.
Solitaire by yourself isn't designed to keep you there.
Yeah.
It just occupies you.
Crosswords kind of are once a week in the local newspaper. It's a different one. It's designed. I mean, you know.
But it's like
not
interactive. Like Luke he told me this, and I didn't know this, that in the accessibility setting, you can make your phone black and white or grayscale. And people who do that, their interaction with their phone drops like by 50 or more %.
Yeah.
And you realize that the use of color is part of the game.
It is.
And so, like famously, this woman, she was called 50 Shades of Blue. She used the right color blue for Google's logo. She, I think it's, Melissa. She's the woman that became the CEO of Yahoo to try to save it. But her whole thing was, didn't work. But she did A/B testing to get the right color blue and to understand people's response to it. For like 50 different shades of blue. And there was a winner. And so this is scientific. It's what there's a whole thing at Stanford, which is the school for the West Coast Silicon Valley people. That it's changing human behavior by machine learning, or machines changing human behavior. That's their tagline. And the whole thing is, how do we use psychology, sociology, and gamification to alter brain patterns?
Like game theory now is a popular class for people to take on like open online things to learn how to like.
There's a reason why companies that design games on the iPhone hire psychologists.
Yeah.
Because they need to know the right amount of frustration, so you'll pay the $1 every time to win the level.
So this is very disturbing.
Yeah.
And so we're saying that this is what it's doing to our humanity. And to be clear, we don't mean those people out there in the world. We're talking about us.
We're talking about
we're
talking
like
about Luke.
We're talking about Luke. So this is what it's doing to us. Because I like that again. I'm going to really remember that occupied, not engaged, because we've all had the experience of trying to. I've even had the experience of watching a video. I open up another tab and I'll play another video. And there's 2 videos playing and I can't watch them. I'm like, what am I doing? You know, or I'm checking my text message while I'm watching Netflix.
I'll tell you what you're doing. You're living the life. Right?
And you think, I can't live this way. So what the bloody hell do we do? There's got to be something we can do.
I think
virtual reality is about to come out. I don't want to get involved with that in any sense.
I just tried it and it was incredible.
Because it's like with every advancement in technology, there is a poverty that results. And that goes back to the bicycle and the post office and
how does a tool change you?
There's always a poverty that results, and I'm tired of going down this road.
This is where I think the new evangelization actually comes in, because if you look at like Benedict talks about it, he calls it the art of living.
Yeah.
And I think for a lot of us, the new evangelization has been how to evangelize others, how do we evangelize the culture as opposed to a way of life.
Yeah.
And I think what you're going to see in the church is a callback to Christianity being a way to live.
Yeah.
And really getting
and not
more
just
into,
a worldview.
Not a worldview,
content.
not my like a political thing, but like how I live. They will know we are. Yes. They will know we are Christians because the TV's not in the living room. Yeah. Because it's in the basement, or it's in there, or we don't have a TV.
Yeah, we have bookshelves filled with beautiful books.
Yeah. Like, this is one of the reasons why I like vinyl records. is because it's a process.
Yeah,
I have to
agree.
put it on. I have to sit there. I know.
You can bash on it in a second,
okay.
but I agree.
I totally agree.
It's like this is the crassest analogy I can come up with. It's the difference between fornication and marital love.
Exactly. Yeah.
Thank you, Luke.
Yeah.
I can't believe anybody would ever say exactly to that comment. But yeah, I mean, I did
love
this.
CDs. What does it say about me?
Yeah, you're a player.
Quick and efficient.
Back in
Sorry.
it was back in August. I gave up the internet, gave up my phone, and wanted to listen to music. Couldn't listen to it on my phone, and so I bought a vinyl record player. And there's something about driving to a store, flicking around, deciding what I'll get, taking it home, having to treat the object with respect that plays the music, actually take care of it. And it's not just I'm going to listen to this number and this number. No, I'm going to listen to it the whole way through. It really helps you appreciate music, even if the quality's not as good.
Yeah. There you go. Thank you. It's warmer. That's scratching. It's a piece of plastic carved out.
Okay, we get it. You don't like
I'm triggered. But that's what we had this quote that Luke found from. I think it was Chaput who quoted Zygmunt Bauman. So Zygmunt Bauman is this famous sociologist who talks about liquid culture and liquid modernity. Yeah. Very important books to understand this stuff. The idea is we went from a solid culture to a liquid culture. Solid culture is where you make things, physical stuff, woodworking, right? All this stuff.
That's a new thing.
And I really
That's
want
good
to
for you. Yeah.
Because there's something physical. There's something physical that is left behind when you're done. And the idea is when you take that to a liquid culture where it's all software driven, and there's this phrase they use in Silicon Valley, Benedict Evans, he's a brilliant guy, he talks about software is eating the world. And it's this notion that everything can
all the hard things are being digested? Is that
well, and it is in a very real way, but also things move at the speed of a wireless update. So like Tesla can give you new features for your car via a wireless update, right? So we are younger people. I think we're caught in this dragnet too. Maybe our parents aren't, but we're caught up in this notion of we expect and demand it now. Like Google did a study where it's like if it's 0.3 seconds too long to load a page, people won't even wait for it to load. We're talking less than half a second, people will be like, nope, I'm done. And so I do this thing where if my computer is hanging, I count to 10 because I know all I want to do is like hit refresh, hit refresh, hit refresh, go to the next page. But there's this weird thing that develops where we demand the always instant on. And Zygmunt Bauman talks about how, what was that great quote? It's like we become,
I can't remember.
Instead of being pilgrims in search of meaning, we're tourists in search of experiences.
Yeah.
And that's it.
And I think there's something to like experiences being good, but not if they're not rooted in meaning.
So, okay, here's where the rubber hits the road. What are you doing in your life to not get sucked up into this?
So me and Aaron have started. So Aaron is my wife. For those who don't know, Gomer. Not you.
Had no idea. Had no idea.
We do a thing where we're trying to. So it's actually my aunt. We got this idea from my aunt and uncle. Where so like when we're home from work, we're gonna take an hour and just like put on some music and like grab some wine and we're gonna just have a happy hour and just talk. Try to arrange
that's awesome.
like living room in a way where, because we have a small hipster apartment, not have it be where it's around the TV, but the TV's just kind of like there. But I would love to be able to put like a drape over or something like that.
Yeah.
But where it's built around conversation, like the actual layout of the room. And there is like a sacramental aspect to this. Like we want it to be what it represents. So how we lay out our living room has, we have changed that, because of trying to get away from that. And also just, I think, I'm starting to just not keep my phone in our room, put it in the other room, just use an alarm clock to wake up, which has been really difficult because...
Alarm clocks are clunky.
Yeah,
it's annoying.
And I do get worried about, like, what if something happens to Gomer and I won't know?
We'll go to the shops and find out. No, so
what about you personally?
For my wife, she did this thing. My wife, this is funny, I'm obsessed with tech. I've been listening to podcasts from the very beginning because it was nerds doing podcasts, and I loved, Leo Laporte and the Tech Show, all these different, This Week in Tech, all of these different shows. It's technology. Yet, I found that my addiction to my phone or my attachment is a lot less than Luke or even my wife. And my wife is not tech savvy at all, but she's into social media. She's into different things, and she's plugged in. That's how she maintains contact with her friends. She's very healthy in what she does on there, but she realizes. that at night with the shiny phone in your face, and that being the first thing, or even if it's your alarm clock. So my wife bought an alarm clock that she controls the light of it, and so she had created this whole basic system around it where we have a plug on the other side of the room on her desk that you plug it in, you put it away, put the phone in do not disturb. Like, I'm very strict on what notifications I let in my life. So every app that I install, you do not let them notify you ever.
I do the same thing.
Unless you find that there's a reason why you need that notification. And so, like, famously, you send me Marco Polos, and I never respond to them because I don't have the notifications on.
I feel so much less bad now.
But for me, I have my phone with me in bed every night because my do not disturb, I bring it on, it kicks on at 9 o'clock, even though I don't go to bed till like 11 or 12. But I read because my brain, I have this tendency to live in my head and think about things and all this stuff. In order to kill that, I read specific literature that won't make me think too hard, but is entertaining enough that I want to read it and then I fall asleep. And it is, my wife can tell you funny stories about me falling asleep, smacking myself in the face.
With your Kindle.
But the idea is I have to go out of my way to create environments where we do this. When me and my wife are sitting down on a couch, we don't use our phones. If we're going to like watch TV at the end of the night, or like, we're very militant around our kids with screen time. Like, I want my kids to have a tradition of Saturday morning cartoons.
Yeah.
So they don't get to watch TV ever until it's Saturday morning, and they get to watch cartoons. And they have to watch the cartoons that they all agree on.
In my house, they have to watch the old Tom and Jerry. That's the only option.
See,
but they're not on Netflix, and you can't get them. I think it's because they think they're inappropriate.
Yeah, no, they do. And so Matthew Crawford, great guy, he wrote a book, The World Beyond Your Mind, where he talks about, he watches his kids play with digital toys, right? And he says, why do infants play with the little VTech tables that stand and light up? He says, because you get an instant response. Like, an infant can't really interact with the world. But when you're pushing these buttons and a thing lights up or a noise is made, it trains them on this. And he says, look at the Mickey Mouse Club from when I was a kid. He says, Goofy would get hit in the head with an ironing board. These are physical objects in the real world that, even though it's silly, like an anvil falling on your head or a grand piano, those were real things that kids could see. Maybe not an anvil, but except in my smithy shop.
Maybe in the Roadrunner.
But then you have this thing where now, have you ever seen the Mickey Mouse Club now?
I would refuse to.
Well, it's awful.
Sure, it's awful.
But what they do is whenever they encounter a problem, they summon from the cloud, oh, Toodles! And it has four things, and they solve the problem by pushing a button. And he's talking about how unreal, summoning from the cloud, this magical techne.
That's what techne does, like it's a tool,
Yeah, and so it's interesting how
I just feel like the solutions you guys are providing, some of them sound good, but some of them don't sound nearly good enough.
Yeah, for me, though, it doesn't have to be. It's good enough for me.
Yeah, well, a lot of that might have to do with our own ability to have self-mastery.
Yeah.
And I think I have my desire to use technology is greater than my self-mastery to avoid it if it's right there.
Yeah.
I wish it wasn't. Maybe for you, it sounds like you have that kind of self-mastery.
And that was the difference with me and Luke. We've talked about this forever. Like, Luke's like, I got to get rid of my iPhone. And then we talk about and I'm like,
well, and this is what I do. And so this happened this last weekend. I got sick and I needed to use it. But I'll give my phone and my computer to my wife to hide in my house.
The best part was getting a text message from you on Friday night. Hey, mate. I'm giving up using my phone for the weekend, and then the next day, hey mate, back on.
You know why?
Because you're sick.
I went to the hospital, so I kind of had to have it. But this is what I've been doing, and I want more of that in my life.
I think you have to start with giving yourself permission to do it.
Yeah.
With something, So
I think what we're talking about right now could be one of the greatest helps to people to grow in their relationship with our Lord. We're trying to say, stop being distracted.
Yeah.
And even podcasts, like people are listening to this podcast right now, they're probably doing it because they don't want to be alone with themselves. It's very Pascalian.
I think, well, and like how often do we go to podcasts or things to like show me how to live? And I think there's like a good thing about that, but there's also this, that's what the faith is for. Like the faith should be that it should help us inform how we live our lives. I had a woman that I work with she told a story where she was feeling totally overwhelmed. She's got like 2 to 3 kids. She's got to have like a clean house, have to have a job, have to have this, have to that. And she was like, I just started to cry in my car and like break down. She goes, then I kind of realized like the faith is the pie crust. It's just the thing that's there that kind of helps me hold everything together. And I have to start to view it like that. And that it's kind of what Hans Urs von Balthasar is getting at when he talks about the I'm drawing a blank. The theological aesthetic, where the church is going to inform, like the faith will inform how I live my life, as opposed to how I want to live my life inform what I think the faith is.
Very interesting.
Because what it ultimately becomes, if the church doesn't inform this, and when I say the church, I just mean the faith as a whole. If it doesn't inform how I live, if it's not the thing that kind of says this is how I'm going to do these things, it ultimately becomes a reflection of myself or of what I think or I want.
I'm reading Anna Karenina now by Tolstoy, and they refer to the Great Fast like it was summer. And he writes it, and so we're all expected to know what the Great Fast is, Lent, and that it's a particular season in our lives. And we were supposed to get this fixed before the Great Fast, and people would talk like that because it was that real in their lives. And I'm not sure if we talk about Lent like that. It feels like, and don't you feel? And I do this too, and I'm a little grossed out at myself. But you see people capitalizing on Lent and Advent. I do that. I hate myself for it. And I hope what I'm providing is actually helpful. Like Thomas Aquinas wrote daily meditations for Lent. This is amazing. It sounds like something Matthew Kelly would do. But he probably didn't try and sell it, like I'm doing. So what's your thoughts on so as we try to evangelize the culture, how much of this is authentic and how much of this is here's the only way I know how to make money. I'm not useful in any other aspect or...
Yeah, well, it's not the new evangelization unless you're making money off of the new
Patreon.com/CF.
But it is hard because, I'm right there with you. I've been expressing this, there's a Catholic celebrity culture that, Matt, you're very much a part of. People recognize you, oh my gosh, blah, blah, blah. And it creates this weird artificiality that doesn't need to be there, right? But at the same time, we get the high privilege of working for the thing we love the most, which is our Lord, right? We get to bring the gospel to people, and the laborer is worth his wages. St. Paul is very clear that apostles should have a share, the teachers should have a share in this. You need to support them. That is a biblical mandate. It's awesome that St. Paul made tents, but that was not mandatory. He was basically bragging that, look, I've never relied on you for
even though
my
I
money.
have a right to.
Even though I have a right to. And that was a contention. People were stirring up all these lies about St. Paul, basically, trying to make him out to be this moneymaker or whatever. And so 2 Corinthians chapter 11 is the greatest comeback of all time, where he's like, I'll boast of what kind of apostle I am. I've been shipwrecked twice, I've been beaten, I've been stabbed, I've been let down from a city wall. And you see this difficulty that I think we all feel. And if we ever lose the tension, we're failures and we're hacks and we need to quit our ministries, which is we should feel nervous marketing the gospel. And I think we all come up with ways to not justify it to ourselves, but hold ourselves accountable. The last episode, Francis Chan kills Gomer's heart or punches Gomer in the heart. Part of that was on me wrestling with this thing how many times can I make a video series or write a book or do a consulting thing for a parish where I feel like I'm making money off of it and then I'm going to go my way and let you flounder or succeed. So what I do is, I got this from a rabbi who says the Torah is free, you pay me for my time. So when I show up at a parish mission, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, I tell them, so when do you want me to talk? Oh, from 7 to 8 o'clock. Is that it? Yeah. Okay, so here's the stipend amount. Okay. And I say, but I'm here. So do you want me to do the mission in the morning for elderly people who can't get out at night or people who don't like to drive at night or people who, whatever? And they're like, you would do that? Yeah. And then during the day, do you want me to lead a reflection for your parish staff? Okay, well, how much is this going to cost me? Nothing. Just the same price, because I feel like if I'm charging for the gospel per talk. That's how I scrutinize this stuff. So I'm trying to be more available.
I really try and accept this as a compliment and not interrupt me because you'll feel awkward about it. But I really respect you and the work that you do. And both of you work in a diocese, that you work in a parish. You work with individual people and families and couples. You do prison ministry. I think that's really admirable, And it's I feel like you have this other thing with catching foxes, but you've remained planted in this community, which is something that not a lot of people do. I I became a Catholic speaker before Catholic speaker was a thing.
Right.
I remember when I first started hearing about it, and I'd go on people's websites and they'd say Catholic speaker. I'm like, oh, no, don't say that. You know, that's not a thing. And I guess it's a thing now.
A funny, dynamic approach to the faith.
Yeah.
And I mean, like, we've definitely talked about, like, wanting to, like, we've started to hit a point where we're like, maybe this is a thing that we do full time. Like, can we get
What's
this
the
to a
Catching
point?
Foxes?
Yeah. And I think...
Patreon.com/yeah.
And because there's a bit of tension where like it gets hard to do this and the podcast. You have all these things that like you want to do, and you want to do it at a certain level of quality. And I like one thing I think kind of going down back to this idea of like how do you make sure that you don't fall into this like am I just gonna like give out crap because it's time to give out crap? Yeah. Like I think what one of the differences is like. Is this needed, or is this just me doing a thing? Do I feel called to do this, or is this just like me?
That is
and
a great question
that's
to
hard.
ask.
I mean,
we've
done that with like. I mean, I've done
but
it
just
with
to
our
begin
podcast.
asking the question, most of us don't.
And I think it's really important. Like I really do for like us to call each other out. Yeah. Like I think we've reached a level of like we're friends where if like if we would ever do a thing, you're like Luke, dude, what are you guys doing? I wouldn't be like, oh no.
I would freak out at you, and then I'd apologize the next day.
No, but it would I think that's really important, and I don't. It's kind of going to sound very
however
elitish. I think it needs to come from people who kind of understand where you are coming from. Yeah. So I'm not giving strangers permission to call me out for things they don't really understand, like what's really going on.
Yeah.
And I know what that sounds like. I
know. You would just have to say, put the shoe on the other foot, and you would say to this rando, how would you feel if I came into your life and started making criticisms of you? I mean, I have no idea who you are.
Yeah. So one of our early critiques was this guy saying, I evangelize my high school student through playing podcasts and other audiobooks that are steeped in the faith when I'm in the car with them. And I can't play yours because you cuss. In reality, I'm like, actually, your kid would probably benefit from us. But
we're becoming huge with high school kids now. It's weird.
It's awkward. It's
so awkward. I'm like,
I go to Civil Youth Conferences. I'm like, please don't listen.
Please don't know who I am.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, let's talk a bit more about this Catholic celebrity culture. I mean, it's awkward.
Mm-hmm. No. I want to talk about it because I feel like it's so easy to believe your own marketing.
But isn't it just an accidental byproduct of conferences and
all
marketing?
Absolutely.
It's almost like, can we really have a church without it? I mean, you've got St. Paul. Is it 1 Corinthians saying some of you say that, did I baptize you?
Yeah, I belong to Paul. I belong to Apollos. I belong to Jesus.
And that's just part of the, because I mean, part of the podcast was started as my reaction to things that I was like hearing. I'm like, this is the same talk over and over again. This is just like the things. I mean, I really didn't pay attention to a lot, so this probably isn't really fair. But it just felt like a lot. I was like, but people aren't having the conversations that I think need to be happening. And we started the podcast as a bit of a response to that. And in the beginning, I was really kind of like anti-Catholic culture.
That's why we don't have the word Catholic in anywhere.
Yeah, because we didn't want it to be like that. And I was very.
And I didn't want to get the local ordinary to give me permission.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, canon law. You actually have to.
And even though really we would get a lot more hits if we were to put Catholic podcasts in our thing. But this is why I get really angry at people who start podcasts or shows that really don't offer anything new or anything, because it's just...
what's that been like for you? As you guys were one of the first Catholic podcast shows, and then now there's been this avalanche of some of it's good, some of it's quite frankly awful.
Yeah, I think it's awesome. Let 1,000 flowers bloom. I say that every time someone asks us for advice. I mean, one day you called me and said, I want to do a podcast, and I sat outside my in-laws, freezing cold. The Heil PR40 is a great microphone.
No, you were super helpful, and I appreciate that. And I do the same thing when people ask me. I'm like, that's awesome. Here's how you do it.
Because here's the deal. That's the great thing about having these gatekeepers down. All you need is a website, an RSS feed, and a way to capture audio. You put that MP3 file out there, anyone can make a podcast.
But I've heard you share some criticisms
I was like, I don't totally agree.
But they won't survive. That's the thing that's interesting, is the average length of a podcast is 6 to 8 episodes, and they die.
But I guess what bothers me is this feeling of...
Well, you've also probably seen it encroach into your own territory, and you've probably also seen listeners being taken away as there's more things to listen to.
I think a little bit.
For example, to be real, I think I was one of the first Catholics on Patreon, and it was doing quite well, and now everybody and their brother's on Patreon. And so naturally people think, well, I'm on Patreon, I'm supporting Matt, it's very easy to support them too, so I'll just cut this in half, and so I've lost a ton of patronage. And so there's a sense in which I'm like, man. But then there's another sense I'm like, that's really awesome that people are able to fund their...
And I really do struggle with this. Like, it's something where I think about this a lot because I'm like, why is this invoking this type of a reaction? Like, there's a thing here that is wrong. And I think for me, part of it is I love the medium. I mean, podcast, when I was out in Idaho and I was in a job where I was very isolated, not from people, but in the position that I had. I was in charge of a K through 12 school. That's very isolating. Like, to wear a ring of power is to be alone. I never experienced that at that level till I was there. And I was like, oh my gosh, I have no real friends. Besides a few, I had like 3 or 4 that were like... They were my really good friends, but that was kind of it.
And as an extrovert, that was
it was rough. And so like podcasts, especially like really, I would go on runs, and it was like a gift from God of like, thank you. It's just so nice to hear people talk about stupid like movies and it was not Catholic at all. It was just, but it was so wonderful, and I loved the medium so much. And I think that's why I get a little bit upset when I see people doing things because and I'm like, this
Give me
is
$5,000 to launch a podcast.
I was really
upset,
and I get it. These guys were trying to like do a thing. It's more for their like friends and family, but it's just like, this isn't just a thing that you do to get to the level that you want. This is something that like we really cared about, not only the content but the way it was presented. And it almost feels just like, this doesn't matter. All the stuff you care about, it doesn't. And it's just like, this is just a thing to be had. This is a thing that I want to feel whatever about myself.
I think it goes to your desire for authenticity in yourself and in your podcast, and the fact that you really respect that. You also respect others who are very authentic. And when you sense a lack of authenticity in a medium that you love, it naturally angers you. And I think that makes sense.
There was this weird thing when we went to college in Steubenville, where people would go there and they'd want to be the youth minister at St. Tim's out in Arizona, where Life Teen started. Or they wanted to go there and they wanted to join our household, which was like a Catholic frat, because that was one that Bob Lesniewski was in. And it would happen every year. Every year. And
well, my youth minister was in AMG, therefore I'm going to be in
and it's just kind of like,
no, thank you, nerd.
There's that. But
he was on all fours behind them, and
but there's just this element of like, this isn't real life, guys. This is this weird subculture that we've created.
I experience that when people come up to me, and they've probably come up to you and they've said, how do I do what you do?
Oh, it's the word.
Now, what the thing is because you really don't know where somebody's coming from, because there was probably a time when you thought to ask or did ask somebody that very question, and you were probably coming from a good point, and I did the same thing. But it's just, I think I feel the same irritation that you might feel as you see all these podcasts spring up. So someone will say to me, like, how do I do what you do? Like, what do you think that I do? Like, you speak, and I'm like, well, where are you speaking now? Are you doing any of that? Do you have a gift for this? No. I'm like, well, why don't you talk to your parish? I don't mean my parish. I mean, like, how do I speak like at a conference? And I'm like, at least ask that with trepidation. Like, at least be embarrassed that you asked me in that way.
Or understand, the one thing that I think as well that I didn't really understand until we started to like have an audience, the demand of that. Like the cost of what that means, and like what I really do get worried that we cause scandal at times, not because of like how we do it, just because of us, like because we are human beings and we screw up, and like the last thing I'd want to do is ever scandalize anyone, or like or I would never want to like lead anyone away, or all those things. I'm like, this is not just a fun thing where it's like, woo, and now I'm cool and I get to hang out with all the people that I love. Like it's there's a demand there, and there's an expectation from the Lord to not let him down.
There's a burden
and that
you need to carry.
And
there's a great line that Chuck, what is his name? Chuck Stanley's a Baptist preacher down in Atlanta. His son is Andy Stanley.
Here.
Yeah, that's right. I'm actually in Atlanta. His son is Andy Stanley, famous non-denominational preacher, and he has this line like, he would hear someone give a talk, like a sermon, an associate pastor going to give a sermon, and he'd be like, nope, you don't have a burden. Like,
that's right.
Don't give me that talk until
What's
you
your
have
holy
a burden.
discontent?
Yeah.
Is
and it's really true for us, like the podcast and the topics that we hit, sometimes they're just funny, But sometimes you need to be funny. We got an email from a person yesterday. I read it aloud to Luke in the car. And it was this guy saying, I felt like I would have walked away from the Catholic faith if it wasn't for your episodes on the scandal. And I would say we probably had 10 or 15 emails from that. And for every person that emails, there's probably a whole group of people. And we make fun of the scandal. We say things that are absurd.
Yeah.
We make jokes about it because it is so awful what is happening in the church that if we don't talk about it seriously, bring our anger, pray for people, repent ourselves, and do the funny stuff, I think we would lose our minds. And so I have this line on my Twitter account. It's a pinned post, and it says, and this was a real conversation at work. This girl said, Mike, you look really good. What have you been doing? And I said, I've been fasting. And she said, well, it's working. And I said, well, I'm one church scandal away from my goal weight. And all these people thought it was
scandal away from
because I keep fasting every time a new scandal came out, right? And so I put that on there, and all these people were like, ha ha ha, share, like.
Yeah.
And there's one comment that has etched in my brain, which is, I get why this is funny, but you should think about the victims. And I was like, oh, like, this is the part of the brokenness, is like, we can't even address things in order to, like, we see our show as a relief valve in so many ways.
That, yeah.
And I have a rector of a seminary who said to me, I'm making all of the men in my seminary listen to episode 8, the one on pornography. He said, because almost all of them are addicted. And when he said that to me, I was shocked, and he said, you are a pressure release valve for the church. And for like ministers in the church. And I was like, that's what I want to be.
Or the anus that flatulates.
That is awesome.
We're all part of the body of Christ, and you happen to be the
Yes, yeah.
Oh, man. Sorry, Teresa Lizou, who's the heart of the church.
This just came out. Holy See, McCarrick dismissed from the clerical state of abuse. I think what everyone watching ought to do, and I'll do this too when I watch it, is just to pause this video and to offer a Hail Mary for McCarrick, because it might even be necessary at times to make light of this, because you're going to cry. You need to find a way to talk about it in a way that doesn't feel like you're constantly asphyxiating, or else you won't talk about it. That's been my whole gig as I've spoken about pornography. Like if we can't laugh in some way, we're just going to cry and we won't address it, because no one likes feeling like they've been hit in the guts with a truck after a talk.
And it's,
But we should pray for this man and for his soul. But I want to get your thoughts on this.
just brokenness, because in a lot of ways, doesn't he represent everything that's been wrong with the church for half a century?
One, boomer. Two.
No, but just
wealthy, regal, cut off from cut off from criticism, because he's so high up. He's an indulgent personality, all of these things. And then he was able to leverage his authority and power over people to get their silence, to get their acquiescence to his sexual advances, and then he was able to cover it up by a whole culture that either A, didn't want to cause scandal in the church, so they're like, well, this is just who he is, and this is consensual, blah, 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 to B, people who were bullied and intimidated into silence. You have priests that changed dioceses because they knew they couldn't work in the same diocese with him. He would keep coming after them. And so there's this whole element where, like, this is like the Me Too movement in the Catholic Church of seminarians saying, me too, my bishop bullied, molested, groped, intimidated, all of this stuff. I know this guy who said, I looked at my future. My whole life was to be a priest. I'm 19 years old in a college seminary, and he's telling me, I will destroy your future if you don't. Now, all I think is, as a man, I can't imagine being bullied by an older man now.
This is something that happened to a friend of yours?
Yes, and you just hear this language, and they're just like, I want to say no, but if I can just get through this, right? But this is after months of manipulation. Like, if I could just get through this, then I can be a priest in a parish, and they'll forget about me. And
it is difficult. I've been in situations in the past where I've had groups ban me from doing specific things in the church, like giving a talk that I was supposed to give. And I've been given reasons. They said to me, you mustn't speak about this publicly, because if you do, you would cause scandal. And I thought, that is so disgusting. Because I see the argument. The argument is, if you just throw this up on Twitter, people don't know the context. But I also see this as spiritual manipulation.
And in Scripture, there's this famous line.
By the way, I need to point out, too, that I wasn't banned for any immorality. But in my mind, I'm like, people aren't going to know that. They're just going to see, I was supposed to give a big talk. I'm now not giving it. What happened to Matt? And it turned out I was saying certain things about prelates publicly, and for that reason was told to stop or else I'd be causing scandal.
Yeah, and there's this passage in Scripture where when King Saul is eventually deposed and killed, all of Israel's troops that rallied around King David started rejoicing, and King David said, "Publish it not abroad." Right? Don't let this go to our enemies so that they can celebrate our weakness.
Right.
So there is an
there
impulse
is a sense in
where
which
you let the evil die within you. Like if someone's gossiping, let it die within you.
And I just wanted to finish that. The reason I brought that up wasn't just to kind of vent, but to say, having prayed about it and sought the counsel of others, I decided there was no significant good that would come from airing this sort of knowledge, and so decided not to. And I'm actually really glad that I didn't. Although my first reaction was like, all right, I'll talk about it.
I'm doubling down. Right? And I was in a church in the Northeast, and they said, we want you to give a I hate it when parishes do this. We want you to give a talk on whatever you want. And then the pastor said, but you can't talk about two things. You can't talk, and this is the 2001 Spotlight scandal. You can't talk about pre-sex abuse scandal, and you can't talk about contraception and marriage. And I said, why? And he said, there are such sensitive topics with this crowd. I was speaking to the parents of teenagers in confirmation. He said, it's such a sensitive topic. These people don't go to church. They will take their kids out of confirmation if you talk about these things. So I go out there, and I'm giving my talk, and I spend, out of an hour talk, I spent 45 minutes talking about the pre-sex abuse scandal and contraception.
You did?
I did. Oh. Because I'm sitting there and
so he tells you not to. I just want to be clear here. And so, you say, I'm going to.
No. So as I'm doing this talk on a topic that I wanted, which is on radically following Christ, and why that looks different than going to Mass on a Sunday. It's supposed to incorporate that, but it's not all of that. The Catechism says the Sunday liturgy does not exhaust all that it means to be a Christian. That's very true. And I think some people, they create that checkbox, well, I went to Mass on Sunday, therefore I'm done. That's the art of life that we're talking about. Mm-hmm. So I'm going through this, and then within this context, you can see the hurt in these people. That they want the gospel, but there are things in their life that are preventing them. And when you begin to address these things that are the taboo subjects in certain circumstances, all of a sudden, like I had a line down the aisle of people saying like, oh my God, thank you so much. Like they went to their pastor and thanked him for bringing out a speaker that could talk about these issues in this way and all this stuff.
So you were kind of acknowledging the frustration people must feel at the sex abuse scandal?
I think there was a fear like, please don't talk about this. And it wasn't like, I didn't come out there being like, well, of course I'm going to talk about it. Yeah. It just kind of ended up that way.
Yeah. Yeah.
And this is the element of, and I know some speakers abuse this, but letting the Holy Spirit kind of have his way in the talk, that you just get this feeling.
One thing also just like acknowledging reality, like, hey, this isn't going to go anywhere if we don't, if there's not a light of shine. Like why is it important to really talk about pornography? Because it's such a prevalent thing that if you're not speaking to that, you're not evangelizing.
Did you
like? Yeah. You're just like, hey, God's great. Yeah. Enjoy your X-rated thing you have on your phone. Yeah, later.
Luke said something earlier that to me, like he kept saying, like the conversations that we knew weren't happening in the Catholic space. One of the things that I think is so. This is why I love Luke. He says things so profoundly in like a drive-by way.
He really does.
But you said, I get so frustrated. We're talking to confirmation students about the sacrament, and none of them believe in God. And it's like, exactly. You go to confirmation class after confirmation class in any suburban parish, I bet you 50 to 98% of those kids have zero relationship with God, and they are actually atheists.
Or they think that unbelief is just an irrational thing.
Yeah,
so you have to start with like, what is belief, and why is it okay to believe? And like, I think you have to talk about the mechanic stuff because and I'm very glad that you put it in a way like stop and pray for him, because something that I need to remember to do, because it's just so easy for me to just like bam, bam, and we do a lot of that.
Yeah, but I mean, it is true. It's we say it all the time, but they're, except for the grace of God, go I. Yeah. I mean, we're all one or two bad decisions away from something terrible like that.
Yeah, Luke just one bad decision. I'm like 3.
3, 4. There's a few hedges around.
Yeah, it's true. And here's the deal. Like, we live in such a disclaimer culture, I feel like it's kind of weird, where you can't just say something, you have to say, well, and also the victims, and also, so I did this thing, town hall at my parish, and I said, and we had already prayed for the victims twice within this town hall format, and I said, and you know what else we have to pray for? We have to pray for the perpetrators. But I said that about 10 minutes removed from actually leading prayer for the victims. And this woman goes, and for the victims. And I was like, yes.
Gladys, you get the heck out of here.
Thanks a lot, Judy.
Always Judy. But no, and I said, yes, thank you, which we already did earlier. We always hold
To be clear, okay, this is not a point for you.
Right, but you have to issue a disclaimer again and again and again and
it's
again.
tiring.
We can't give each other grace anymore.
Yeah.
Like, like Bishop Barron, when you're on the Ben Shapiro show and you have those lights, just watch as the show goes on. He's just sweating bullets.
Is he?
Right? Oh, I shouldn't say sweating bullets. He's sweating because
Yeah.
you're in a studio with these crazy weird
He's a
orange
jack guy
lights.
as well, so he's gonna be sweating a lot. He's got a water intake going on.
Yeah.
But this whole thing is like...
You just want to say to others, you sit in that seat.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
And you,
The Ben Shapiro, who is a master at arguing, even to the point of bickering, like he is the master at it. To be on his set and him be like, "You think as a Jew I'm going to hell?" And him be like, "What?" and when you're in that seat, it's a totally different thing than being an armchair quarterback. So just give people a little grace. Use it as a teachable moment.
Yeah.
Don't attack it.
And this comes from us, the king armchair quarterbacks.
Well, let's get to some funny stuff. I mean, this has been funny, but I wrote down. So, you know what I want to talk about?
Sports.
Let's
Wait, no.
First off,
that.
more of a funny thing first. I want to talk about, and this is a funny question more than anything else. This has nothing to do with anything serious, so we're totally taking a transition here. Okay. I want us to think of what is the best worst superpower. Not what is the worst superpower. But out of all of the bad superpowers that one could possibly have, what would be the best out of that list?
Best worst superpower. Aquaman. I mean, it's just kind of like,
Aquaman, what's
hey, you're in the water.
You talk to fish.
There you go. Thanks.
That's a good superpower, though. You can control all marine life. Also, your bones have become
But,
like steel
how's
under
it
the
gonna help
compression of
Kansas?
the water. How's it going to help Kansas?
Yeah,
Why does it need to? Here's what I mean. Here's what I mean. My friend
Sorry,
Thomas,
Kansas.
my friend Thomas Clements came up with this one. I got to give him credit. He's like, okay, the best worst superpower would be being able to run slightly less fast than the Flash, but only when your eyes are closed. That's a good best worst superpower.
Okay.
The reason
How about this? How about this? You can only fly as fast as you can run. And it wears you out the same. You're like, whoa, there's Gomer. He's flying.
You can imagine trying to explain this to the Justice League as to why they should let you in.
Okay, I have one. You have you've got like 10 times the amount of discipline that Batman has. Twice the amount of intelligence that he has. And not even a third of the wealth. So you're just kind of stuck. You're just kind of like, I guess I'll just read some books.
Although if you had that kind of intelligence and determination, you'd probably end up making a good amount of money.
He's poking holes. You notice he hasn't poked a hole in my flying thing.
That was a good one.
Hey, I'm going to go up to the top
Oh, come on,
floor.
mine was funny.
It was
But
good.
imagine trying to fly over a building
Or
and
here's
it's like
what-
walking up
Being
the
able to
stairs.
control your bowel and urination, what do you call these? Bodily functions. Being able to control them for up to a month. So you can go for a month without peeing or pooping.
And you have this great...
And then then it's just a month of like, buckle up, kid.
Unleash the Kraken!
It's like, here's my superpower. Yeah, it's good.
I'd imagine you had a big sand clock that had the sand for exactly 1 month, and you're like, and go! And as it was getting down, they're like, just get a hotel, honey. Get an Airbnb somewhere else.
Here's a pallet of Gatorade for when, you're going to get really dehydrated.
some
Or
probiotics.
right after, or something like somebody dies, and the only way you can save them is by pulling your pants down. They'll be saved, but no one will know that they actually died, but everyone will remember that you took your pants down. I just haven't thought that one through. But you can see how that would be embarrassing.
Stripe21.com. No, what about you?
Stripe?
Is that what it's called?
No, but I'm glad you screwed it up. Consider.
What about you can jump really far,
Yeah.
but you don't have super strength, so when you land, you break your legs.
That's a really good one.
You can read people's thoughts,
Yeah.
but only the angry opinions that they have about your podcast. Which is also known as Twitter.
Yeah,
My
this is
superpower
good.
is Twitter.
All right, let's talk about sports. I want to begin this by talking about the morality of UFC.
Banana. Okay.
So let me just begin with a simple question. What is your opinion on the morality or lack thereof of
physical
UFC.
combat sports.
Yeah.
Right?
Let's limit it to UFC, or maybe both UFC and boxing.
Okay. I will not try to go to other sports. So
we can go to sports after.
No,
this will be a segue.
I have been wrestling with this because I used to like it, and then I watched the segment. I was like, oh wow, this is intense. I see what they're doing here. I get why this is really popular, and it takes an insane amount of athleticism, skill. These are very intricate punches and kicks and things, and there's in one sense, it comes across as a little barbaric, but I don't mean that in a bad way because it's such like
it's brutal.
It's brutal. It's people they're fighting. They're just going after each other, and I think the damage done to the person because of that, or what you have to do in order to win. I kind of wonder if maybe it's not good. Because Sorry.
No, I didn't mean to cut you off, but I like what you said there. I mean, you began with making a reference to what is good in it. We're not talking about two talentless oafs who have just thrown into a cage to beat the crap out of each other. We're talking about people who are incredibly disciplined, athletic, and capable of tremendous skill in taking down their opponents.
And I like one thing that you hear about is people like this give me a chance to like fuel my rage, and I get that because that's one of the good things about sports. But the question with MMA is you use your rage to then literally beat another person to a pulp, or the goal is to cause an intense amount of harm to this person to the point where they're about to break their arms, they have to tap out. And I'm like, that might be the line.
Yeah. So defining terms, MMA, mixed martial arts. So if you have boxing, you have a very standardized form of boxing. Whereas mixed martial arts, you can use kicks, you can use punches, you can use, you can grapple, and it's all this close combat type of stuff. When the UFC first came out, it was insane. Illegal in a lot of states. In the state of Oklahoma, it was illegal. And it was largely unmanaged. It was a ruleless cage fighting, is really what it was. And then, I can't remember when, probably like 15 years ago, someone bought UFC and added similar rules that you would have in boxing to systematize and all this stuff. And one of the things that you see, so if you frame it as an institution with a tradition of excellence within the sport itself, what UFC did in bringing together 20 different, 30 different martial arts styles, regular boxing combined with Muay Thai boxing, judo with Taekwondo and all this stuff, you realize that actually a lot of forms of martial arts are terrible. In fact, they don't actually prepare you for an actual fight, and things like judo and Muay Thai boxing and all this stuff, those who were skilled in that ascended to the fastest levels the quickest. And now it has leveled out where the industry is essentially these types of styles you have to adopt. Abandon all the kung fu, all the theatrics of kung fu. And people say, well, it helps you with personal discipline. That might be true, but when you're in the ring, you will lose. And so there's all these famous videos of MMA fighters who are just judo champions who are really good at it, destroying these wizened masters at these different arts. So there's these elements.
Beard like
I did like a Fu Manchu, right?
Yeah.
Oh, because that's the kung fu approach. If you look at in China, they used to have mortal combats, right? You would fight people to the death, and you have to sign these waivers and all this stuff. And this guy, literally, there's a movie called Hero with Jet Li. It's a beautiful movie, but he loses his family. He in his desire to be the best, he kills a guy who's really revered, and his disciples kill his family in retribution. But he ends up creating what we would today call mixed martial arts,
right.
a precursor to the UFC. And it takes and reforms the sport around these standards of good sportsmanship and practice and stuff. But the argument against it is still, at the end of the day, without all the fancy stuff that I just said, it's two people in a ring where the goal is to use physical violence to subdue the opponent to the point where you want them to black out, right, or tap out. You want to TKO them, right? And so that's where I think the moral issue comes up. Now, I come from a boxing family. My dad was, not a famous boxer or anything like that, but he used to box, and that was very much, my parents are from Philadelphia. Rocky is a part of our lives. And I always grew up thinking this is one of the greatest sports ever. It's one person versus one person. It's not a team, none of this team stuff that they're putting in the Olympics. It's one person going at it against another. peak athletic skill, endurance, all this stuff.
Yeah. So I can acknowledge all of the benefits that you just outlined, but I'm leaning towards the position that both UFC and boxing are immoral and that Christians should not support it or even watch it. And so the reason for this would be that we are persons made in the image and likeness of God. It's been forbidden to us that we should inflict violence upon another human being or upon ourselves. Given what we know about UFC and boxing, we can't pretend that significant damage isn't being done to these athletes.
Mm-hmm.
Now, obviously, there are situations where we can legitimately use violence. Mm-hmm. But it seems to me that if you want to defend UFC, you have to defend the thesis that it's morally okay for one person to use violence to dominate his opponent for the sake of entertainment and money. And I just don't know if those are two good reasons to justify it.
I think those are two parts of it. Those are the external goods tied to it that can be tied to any sport or activity. But there's an element within the sport that advances the sport itself. It is the problem is the blood. The problem is the violence that lasts, or the damage that lasts outside of the ring. And that's a very real thing. That's why boxers have gloves, and that's why they, all that stuff. Yeah.
You have to start applying that, though, to the NFL.
So here's where I would differentiate that. So I'm open to the possibility of being against the NFL. I'll go there if my argument has to lead me there. And by the way, this is fun because this is an example of what we spoke about earlier in the podcast of having the ability to think things through in real time without having to have a hard and fast opinion on this. Yeah. But I think the difference between NFL and UFC is in UFC, the intention, the specific intention is to dominate one's opponent through violence, whereas that's an accidental byproduct of football. You could watch an NFL game, there'd be no significant violence that took place, and still say that it was a good game, but you couldn't watch UFC and there'd be no significant violence and say that was a good fight.
Well, is every tackle
an
act of violence?
Because why I wouldn't agree with that. I'm not, sorry, I feel like it's you're wrong.
No,
but if you look at I was an offensive lineman. The whole point is to push the other guy out of the way, as hard and to
put him on his butt,
to hurt, not to hurt him, especially when it's done. This is why I think you could possibly make the argument that it's fine at the high school level, but not at the end, not when it's a professional, because you are so big, you are so strong, you are so fast. You're playing for quite literally millions of dollars are on the line. These guys have an average career of about 4 years, and they are paid. Quite often, their big pay comes from what they the things that they do well. So they were able to block this guy 10 out of 12 times well. Their pay gets bumped, whatever, things like that. And it's and the way that you do that is inherently violent. I mean, it is a violent thing, the way that it's done, the way that you have to engage each other. The sport itself, I mean, you are going after a person. I mean, I saw a guy at a game get paralyzed. It was the worst thing I've ever, and it honestly caused me to start going, I don't know if I can do this anymore.
As more studies come forth with the long-term effects, both cognitive and just the body effects, then it might come to a point where one has to say, well, this isn't justifiable anymore. But I don't know much about American football. I don't really understand the game.
Because it's much so.
It's like rugby.
I played
less violent.
They throw it forward.
I played both. I played rugby and I played.
I would hate to have
football.
you running at me. Can I just say that? It was full speed.
I would love it. I would my arms.
And when you try to tackle people in rugby the way that you would in an American football game, it destroys your body. I mean, it hurts. It is a painful thing. And it's the way you hit people in rugby is very, very different. It's
What do you think is more violent?
Oh, the NFL by far.
Yeah.
By far.
Really?
I mean, it's not even close.
Okay.
Now, there are things in rugby that are a little bit, not I think when
Getting
rugby
in the
goes
scrum
bad,
and you're uppercutting people.
When rugby goes bad, it can get a little bit worse because you're going to scrape a dude's face. I mean, I know a guy whose face actually got he had to have
But there are rules put into place to modify to make it more moderate.
And within the NFL, the way that you are the way the game works inherently hurts your body. So you're inherently going to people head first when you're on the offensive line. You've got guys who are 300 plus pounds going at each other like this, and it's in violent, intense ways.
So what I would say in response to that, which I know wasn't meant to be a full-blown criticism because I don't have a full-blown argument, But have you ever heard of the fallacy of the beard? I'm
on.
sure there's a great Latin name for it that I'm not aware of. But the basic idea is if I don't shave tomorrow, do I have a beard? And you'd be like, no. All right, what if I don't shave for a week? You're like, I don't know. What if I don't shave for like 3 months? And eventually you'd be like, well, that's a beard. Just because I don't know when it became a beard doesn't mean I can't say you have a beard, you have a beard.
Yeah.
Likewise, just because I may not be able to pinpoint when something is violent enough for it to be immoral, it doesn't mean that I'm unable to point to some particular sport and say that is immoral.
Yeah, no. And I would say that's why I think in terms of like high school sports, so I'm at a point now where, like God willing, we have kids. I don't know if I would let them play I would play American football in high school, which like hurts a little bit because I loved. I mean, it helped like
it teaches a lot of good things.
Yeah, there are things.
This is the other thing. There's a lot of positive things to things that are bad. I can't think of one negative, awful thing that doesn't also have some accidental benefits.
Well, and I mean, you can't tell this right now because I'm so out of shape. But in my mid to late 20s, I started to work out with a personal trainers and got very in shape. And they were always like each one, and they were all independent of each other because it was based upon where I lived and stuff. Who I was working with would go, wow, you're one of the few people I know that actually gets better as the workout. Like you stay at the same level, and like you end very strong. And they're like, that's really not like weird, but weird. And I was like, why is that? And I started to think, I wonder if it's because of when I played sports in high school, especially on the football team. Our team was built to be good in the fourth quarter. Our whole strategy was we're gonna outwork you, we're gonna out endure you, and we're gonna beat the crap out of you in the fourth quarter. And we always did that. And I just kind of wonder if is it ingrained in my head to preserve through these things?
So undoubtedly there are benefits in UFC that it teaches discipline in a way that perhaps wouldn't be learned elsewhere or maybe not as easily. So that's granted. I think the other reason I'm against UFC is that cockfighting and bull baiting or bear baiting. So for those who aren't aware, cockfighting is obviously having just two roosters rip each other apart for the sport of it. Bear baiting or bull baiting is where you would tie a bull to a rope to like a peg in the ground, and you would give it about 10 to 30 yards, and then you would set dogs on it. And the goal is to have the dogs immobilize the bull. And this is, in fact, why the old English bulldog was bred, specifically for this purpose.
Oh my gosh.
So,
Barbarians.
Yeah, this was in the 19th century. It was eventually banned, right? Yeah. Both have been banned, not just because the growing awareness that we shouldn't cause animals to suffer needlessly, but also because of the idea that it vulgarized the masses. Yeah. So if you're the sort of person that enjoys watching roosters tear each other apart or dogs tear each other apart, I don't know what that says about you, but I can't think it says anything good. And I think that something is similar here in the UFC. I went to a cigar lounge recently. My mate and I were having a cigar and the UFC was on. I didn't want to watch it. I don't agree with it. And I saw the way people looked at it. And to quote my friend Jonathan Van Maren, he said that UFC is to fighting what porn is to sex, in a sense, right? That it appeals to that baser appetite, to that wrathful appetite, like porn plays to the lustful appetite. And I just thought, I don't think that this is healthy. And this is going to be really politically incorrect, but here we go. I think it's especially awful to watch women tear each other apart. I haven't fully figured out why that's the case. I suspect that most people feel more uncomfortable about watching women beat the living crap out of each other. They're afraid to say it because it's not politically correct. I can think of two reasons. I think one is if woman is the crown of creation, if she is, then when you pervert something that's higher up, it becomes uglier. I think also because we have this understanding that women's bodies weren't built for combat in the way that men's bodies were built for it. So just like a man can exercise, build muscle to a point where you're like, okay, dude, that's not healthy anymore. You would say that of a man. I think you could say that of a woman as well. And I think that might be, I don't know enough about it, but I think that might be the case when it comes to women in UFC.
I think there's another element when it comes to Mortal Kombat, right? Like in the gladiator games, you're murdering each other, right? The point is you have two former military men typically fighting each other, skilled warriors with the sword, and they're there to kill each other. And we're there to watch people die, right? In the UFC and in boxing, we're not there to watch people die. We're there to watch the sport that kind of surrounds us. So there are rules that are supposed to be there to protect the people. And you have trainers, and you have a towel that the moment that towel hits the floor, everything stops. The game is over. You forfeit to save your life. Like we invented within the system ways of ending things to keep people from being too damaged, right? Even though the actual art of that is combat. Like it is combat. So I'm reminded of a quote from Theodore Roosevelt, as one does.
Good old Ted.
Good Ted.
We both had the same thought at the same time.
I saw you both have that thought. Your heads both tilted back an inch, and then you.
What's going on a coffee, Mom?
The good Ted.
The good Ted.
Teddy Roosevelt on the outside, Cardinal Ted, and continue.
Mr. Ted.
Mr. Ted.
But the interesting thing he said, this is back in the day when football was a leather cap, right? And then, but it still had similar rules of just smashing and tackling and all that. He said most men aren't raised in the country where they know how to hunt and hike and all this stuff, and most men don't go off to war. So we need a thing like this, something aggressive and physical to keep men men. Basically, that was his understanding when he was the president and he was pushing football, right? Which is funny to think of it. We don't think of it like that. But football, in a lot of ways, is training for war, right? Like the use of the word combat is not accidental. The point of football is to smash each other into the ground and across a ball across a goal line and more than the other guy. And so when you look at it from that perspective, he would say, and I think that because he was also a big boxer, that boxing is training, right? Boxing is training within combat of it removes the warlike tendency from society, but we still have these tendencies. And if you're a young man, you're not being sent off to war, you still need discipline. Men are aggressive. You need to look at that aggression and channel it. Now, some men, like yourself, that is not appealing at all.
Well, no, it's appealing.
Okay.
I used to watch UFC. I would buy DVDs back in the day. I could get into it right now. If I just push past my
But would you do it?
Would I ever do it myself? Yeah. I'm 35. I'm out of shape. There's no chance I would do it.
I don't know. Kevin James did it, and Here Comes the Boom, and he nailed it.
So I could see myself enjoying it, just like I could see myself enjoying porn. But I think both are immoral.
Yeah,
Do you think they're immoral?
Although I think pornography is intrinsically immoral, and I don't think fighting is.
Because
I just don't think that sport and money are justifying factors for that particular form of violence.
Immoral to a point where if you watch it, you should go to confession? Like if you know, like, is it on that kind of a level of a sin, or is it just immoral?
I haven't thought it through.
Because I wonder, like, so to compare it to other sports, if you mind if I go down this road a bit, I'm a huge soccer fan, huge. Huge. It's pretty sad.
Really annoying.
And there are times when I go to these games and I'm in the crowd where they do all of the chants, and I'm just so struck with, like, this is people just trying to find meaning. Like, this isn't this important, everyone, right? Like this.
I belong with you, right? I belong with you.
And there's something very good about being, especially when you have your national teams.
Yep.
I love it because it's everyone coming together. It doesn't matter what your politics are, although they make it political and it drives me nuts at times. But like, it's truly people coming together, and the only thing we have in common is we're from this like home. This is our home, and we love it. Yeah, and it's incredible, I love it. This idea that
that's why I love watching the World Cup. But I'm not interested in English leagues playing each other. Although I'm sure if I got into football enough, soccer enough, I would.
But what's very weird about it is you get a point where these things, like those leagues out in England, and like even the World Cup, get so detached from what they actually are. Yeah. They cease to be these town clubs, and they become global billions of dollars worth of brands.
Yeah, and looking at it from Alistair McIntyre, a great philosopher, he would say that's where there's internal goods to something and external goods. The external goods, fame, money, all that stuff, that's entertainment. That's where you look at the sense like the town, the club, the sport, the local kid made good on the local team and all this stuff, and then it becomes an industry. It gets commoditized, globalized, capitalize, right? And then all these external goods affect how the thing is done rather than bettering those who are within it, right? And you see this with every single sporting event. I mean, NFL is $1 billion industry. If we stopped having epic hits and tackles in the NFL because men are getting concussions that are literally damaging their brains for the rest of their lives, there is a resistance to that in the NFL because it's like, but it makes it less exciting,
and
less viewers.
they used to sell DVDs and tapes of like intense hits
Yeah.
where it's just like,
Yeah.
I mean, I was at a bar one time and I saw Junior's sale there, and so everyone doesn't know, he was a defensive lineman for a bunch of teams, specifically the Chargers, and I was in San Diego, and he was there.
San Diego.
San Diego always goes down smooth. And he was there, and everyone was like, "Oh, it's really great to see him," And then like a year or two later, he killed himself, and I want to say his wife or like something. I mean, that actually may not have happened, so I want to just say just himself. But like, and when it's the cost, like, what is the cost of this stuff? And I think as Catholics, we believe that the ends do not justify the means. So when you look at global like soccer, take a guy like Ronaldo, who there's this, I don't know if it's good, but I've heard there's this one documentary about him that just came out, and it like has his mom on there, and he talks about how he was taken out of her home at the age of 10, and she basically lost her son. Now he's worth hundreds of millions, and they get all these things, but like at the age of 10,
is she complaining about this?
Yeah,
because presumably she okayed it.
Yeah, but like she's like, this was the cost of this. Yeah. So like how it works is like these young kids. This happened with Messi out in Argentina. This team out in Spain saw him there, brought him over there at the age of 10. And there's something very Spartan-esque about that, where these kids are now they're not like forced from their homes, but it's like, hey, are you going to go to work for like Real Madrid? I'm trying to remember. I think that Ronaldo was a team from his own country, but still, like, they're removed from the home. This doesn't happen everywhere, but especially out in like England, because the teams are so like localized and it's so small. But again, let's just take the Messi example. 10 years old, Argentinian kid moved out to Barcelona to the point where he almost didn't play for the Argentinian national team. He was offered to play for Spain, and this
deny your heritage.
And this is a huge deal out there. Yeah. I mean, this is massive. I mean, this is as big as this is why you play to be on these teams. And people out in like Argentina actually call him the Catalonian, because they're kind of angry that he's never won a World Cup. But this idea of like, is this I support a sport. I'm obsessed, quite honestly, with a sport that like this is what you have to do to be the absolute best at this.
Yeah.
Somebody would look at that and say, well, this guy's had a real blessed existence. I mean, presumably at the age of 10, he was able to develop particular virtues that a lot of people won't ever get to develop.
Yeah.
Not to mention the fame and the money. So what's the evil in it? Is the evil solely that he got taken out of his home, or is it the idea that it feels like kids are being manufactured to be specific?
I think there's that. And I think also the fact that these virtues, like, and you guys probably will be able to talk about this a little bit more than I can, but all these virtues are supposed to be at the service of what? I mean, they are good in and of themselves. But they help us do good and grow closer to God. But what's the point of developing quote unquote like virtue if all it does is make you obsessed and really good with this one? Like all these guys who are the best of the best, we would not like them. They're terrible people to be around. Kobe Bryant, Michael Jordan, all these different individuals were notoriously terrible teammates.
Oh, really?
They're just so obsessed with so like they take these things, they take this insane amount of like discipline that they have, and they apply it to a thing that is really kind of detached from any sort of real good.
Yeah, and you look at it from the perspective of I was a youth minister for 10 years, and you saw this definite shift that in the 50s and 60s you had this thing called adolescence, high school culture, all this stuff. And you were trying to help them become adults. So you had things that were formed by American society to help adolescents transition into good adults. And one of those was the rise of youth ministry. In the 60s and 70s, you have youth sports widespread. You had the foundation of the Little League and all of these things. And the whole thing was community, camaraderie, teamwork, skills, self-discipline, all the things you need as an adult just to be an adult in the world. You can get through playing team sports and doing all this stuff. But what ended up happening is what happens to everything in America. All of a sudden, fame is attached to a particular coach, right? All of a sudden, that coach who's teaching Pee Wee, Little League, baseball is moving up. Now he has a full-time job as a high school coach. You know, I was in Texas where they had, in one district, they had to raise the salary of the superintendent so that they could pay that person $1,000 more than the high school football coach. And you think about the obsession around that.
Texas.
But you have all of this, and you realize what happened probably in the mid to late 80s is you have these institutions that served kids on behalf of adults to help kids become adults. Then it did this. And the kids served the careers of the adults. You have that in youth ministry. You have that in youth sports. You have that across the board. And now you're at this where $1 billion career is started for a 6-year-old, right? You have parents who are putting their kids in tackle football at the in 4th and 5th grade so that they can become high school football players and start on the varsity team so that they can be picked up by a college so that eventually they'll get that NFL contract. And you have these things happening in all these sports that now it is no longer about camaraderie, teamwork. It is about cash money. It is about getting, you know, all these accolades and fame. It is about other people's adult ambitions for your life that are imposed upon you. And I think that is a very dangerous thing. And I started seeing this and every youth minister knows this, right? You do confirmation in high school. Half the kids say, well, I'm not going to go to that because I have sports ball, right? And you got these sports, well, I can't go on the retreat because I have a game, a tournament, or this or that. And the parents are fine driving hundreds of miles to take their kids in, but they can't bring them to mass on Sunday and class on a Wednesday or something like that, you know? And this is systemic, right? We invest, this is our life, and eternity is so long, and we invest everything.
And it's tough too because if you really got going back to your point of but if he gets all this stuff out of that, isn't it good? It's like, well, what stuff does he really get? Yep. He gets to have a life where he's detached from like reality because he can't. I mean, if you look at Messi, he cannot go. There is a gold cast of his foot was sold in China for millions of dollars. Like this is now he is the exception to but. Like that's what I mean. We've got that. There's a kid right now on the American team, Christian Pulisic, who when he started at 17, he was like so good. I was at the game where he played his first game, and he was a 17-year-old, and I was freaking out. Here he is, the kid who's gonna be. This kid was sold for $70 million recently to go to team out in England. The rights to have him. And there's never been an American $70 million. Now that is low compared to certain. Well, really? So the highest one was $200 million. This was this was like Neymar to go to PSG. I'm in the wrong business. No, exactly.
You ever seen that Key and Peele sketch where it's like ESPN but for school teachers? Sally was traded for $2.4 million based on her reading skills.
Exactly. Because I like Europe and they don't trade. Oh, they don't trade players. You buy the rights to them, and so.
How Orwellian is that?
He's the thing. I kind of had this thought of this kid should be going to prom. He should be hanging out with all of his buddies, not having a bunch of drunk 30-year-old men cheering him on a field
and booing him when he makes a mistake.
No, he is way too precious for us to do that yet. But there was this thing where ESPN when he started getting very good, he was still high school age, had a thing where you could just watch him the whole game on a stream. They had a camera just on him, and at that point in time, everyone was like, okay, this is a bit much. He's a kid.
He's in the locker room.
He's a kid. Let's not. This isn't fair to put all this onto a kid, and that's where I get a little bit uncomfortable with all because again, it's not on the level of Messi, but the fact that the cost is he doesn't have a normal life. I mean, he will forever not have a normal life. And
wouldn't you support a ban, a federal regulation saying if you're in high school you can't play a professional sport, if you're in college you can't? I want that. I think it has to be maintained because
the money. As a soccer fan, and I say no.
But the money is so real. Wasn't it Kevin Garnett that was pulled right out instead of going into college? He went right into the NBA. I mean, you have all of these things where you're robbing people for the sake of I gotta get them. And what if they get injured their first year out because they're so young? Their whole career's gone.
How many? Well, and this is tough too. When you get to the NFL and college football, the fact that we have college football, these are supposed to be guys who are in school, guys and gals. But when you get to that high of a level where these people make, there's $1 billion. I think the contract for all of the bowl games was $2 billion, And it's off the back of these kids, to be blunt, who
African American kids who are not paid.
Yeah, who are like, and they
Oh my God.
and they get like a free education, but like look at the demand on if you're at this high of a level, the demand on your time is insane.
Yeah, you're doing.
And if you get injured,
yeah.
what happens to you then? Then their whole lives are spent.
Dropped.
And like these are kids, so you can't blame them. I'm not gonna blame like a kid who didn't really try in high school because he didn't have to. When everyone caters to you because you're a good athlete, and then you get injured, what are you going to do? You've never had to work for anything in your life, and it's not fair to them. It's
Other than this one skill, which now is taken from.
And like this is why you can also make the argument that the NFL you should be able to go from high school to that, but that's a whole other thing. So I think if we don't have these conversations, I think the barbaric thing ultimately is to just keep on doing this stuff and not ask, what is this doing to us? What is it doing to us? What is this doing to these kids here? Like this, I mean, I remember when I heard about Ronaldo, because I know a guy who used to run all of his social media stuff. He worked for the company. He was just like, I feel bad for him. Like his life, I don't envy any. It's like truly the Midas touch, like what that does to a person.
Yeah, the elite of the elite.
Yeah.
Where do you see, we'll begin to wrap up here with the question, where do you see the church and our society in the next 50 years? Do you ever think about that?
I think about that all the time.
Such rapid changes.
So one of the things that really encourages me is the fact that people aren't, this is going to sound weird, because people, who's having kids? Conservative Orthodox Catholics. So, and I mean that not in the sense of right-wing people, I just mean people in terms of their faith and their morals.
And Mormons.
Yeah. I think we might be in I think the church itself, not in the eyes of the world, but in the quality of her life, could actually be really good because of that.
This is why I love the Benedict option. Did you read that book?
3 or 4 times.
I haven't yet. I have some hesitations
and
about
Leah
it.
Labresco's Building the
I haven't read that yet. Is it good?
It's very good.
She's excellent, Leah.
Do you feel like it, because my only real hesitation with it, and again, I have not read these books, is that we forsake the culture for these things, and I so love
I think the
culture.
name lends people to think that that's the case, that we're going to retreat to our monasteries while the culture falls apart.
Yeah.
I mean, to my mind, he's explained again and again why he doesn't necessarily mean that. I think what he's talking about is we need to retreat into Catholic cultures or Christian cultures where we can know of our heritage, what we believe, why we believe it. We need to begin doing human things again, cease being distracted so that we can live a beautiful human life, and then to go out into the culture or whatever this thing is to bring the gospel. I don't think it's a full-scale retreat at all, and I think he's been careful to say that.
I think, so you have this element where the culture is colonizing us. So missionary activity in the 1800s was too often aligned with colonization. So you're a Western power, you're conquered an African nation, and then in come the missionaries. And the culture, or the kings and queens or whoever, was supportive of the missionaries because you're going to make the local population like us. Not love us, but be like us, act like us, think like us. And too often Christianity carried with it that colonization. And then the other side of it now today,
that's a very
when you're
interesting take.
aping the culture in order to, this is the problem that I think the Benedict doctrine recognizes. Too often evangelization apes the culture.
Yeah.
And wants to highlight the good parts of the culture and bring Christ in the middle of the good parts and do this and do that. Like Bishop Barron in his movie commentaries, he says, I'm not reviewing the film. I'm not a film critic. I'm pointing out the light and the darkness within the big themes and stuff. And so you have this element where you realize that once you start doing that, you find the culture colonizes you. And you look around, like they used to do this, this one group, there's a podcast called This Cultural Moment, evangelical, non-denominational people, and they're leading these things, and you find one's in Melbourne, and the other one's in Portland, and they talk about how these are the most progressive cities, in the world in one sense, and what are they? They're all homogenous. They're white, wealthy, young adults. Urban living. It's we're so progressive, yet no one is
different,
dissimilar to us, right? And so they talk about how you do ministry in this setting. And so I would say that my problem with the Benedict option, I like it because the idea is re-emphasizing you can't have Christianity without a community. And for so often, it was detached from community and placed within the individual. You could say that is very Protestant-esque. That is has been carried on the shoulders of the magisterial Reformation, aka Luther and Calvin, and their descendants. The radical Reformation of the Anabaptists that happened a century later was much more community focused. And in a way, they recovered a sense of church that I think in the Catholics, we've lost now that we're in America. We used to have ethnic enclaves, that's gone. Now we're just kind of like this personal conversion model, which is why the danger of podcasts is I don't need the parish, I got the podcast.
Yeah.
I don't need to go to the university, I got Pints with Aquinas. And then when I level up from that, I got Father Nicanor and I can read this and do this. But that's always been there. I mean, books have always been there, whatever. The issue is, how am I investing in community? Do I owe my neighbor, the Muckenthalers, what do I owe them? So I had a diocese say, we want you to be our director of evangelization. And I said, no. And they're like, you won't even consider it? This is a next step in your career. I said, it's not well, I mean, there is an element where it is my career. I got 4 kids, buy my book. But this thing, and I sat there and I remember this, my beautiful neighbor, right? And their family, their kids, all of this stuff. And I said, okay, so I have a neighbor named Angie, who comes into my house, brings her kids over, walks in the garage door, makes herself a cup of coffee, pours another one for my wife, and they sit down and talk. And there was no phone conversation that happened beforehand. I said, how much is that worth, and can you pay me in money? Like, is my wife going to have that friendship over there? See, this is what we owe when we become rooted. It's not just about me climbing the corporate ladder. What do I owe my neighbor? And we never think about that. And so my whole thing with the Benedict option is, it's brilliant when it really pulls us back to community. I think it can have this tendency to be anti-evangelistic, which means we double down on who we are, but I think part of who we are is mission, right? So I don't think he negates that. I don't think he emphasizes the community is meant to be a community in mission, not just, oh, look at these great witnesses, but like, I'm going out and inviting you into my house. I'm going to my next door neighbor and inviting you over. If I have community, I do that, and that's what I do. So inspired by the Benedict option and building the Benedict option, I bring over a bunch of people. I have some guys that I know and love who love sports ball. I do not. I cannot talk about it. My wife is more of a man than I'll ever be. Rock arm. But she loves sports, and she can have conversations with it. I can't. And so I was inviting this one guy over, big college football fan, all this stuff. I invited men over that I knew he could have a relationship with. Yeah. And I paid for all the food and all this stuff. It's very, like, bring in those who aren't going to pay you back. And that's not the point. The point is having fellowship with each other. And that's what I think is good. Yeah. But it can tend to collapse when it's like, well, these are my 7 friends and I'm only going to, it can become cliquish very quickly.
Yeah, that's no doubt. Yeah. You didn't give a short take. Where will we be in 50 years?
Holy moly, I didn't.
You sure didn't.
The American parish model is not going to last. The suburban captivity of the churches has ruined Catholicism, understandably so. The majority of Catholics, white flight, all that stuff, all the demographic shifts to the suburbs meant regional parishes, non-local parishes. And now we're going to watch, if the statistics are going to be believed, the greatest immigration back into cities since the Industrial Revolution. And where is all these tiny little churches that are neighborhood street churches, whatever? They're all sold because there's not enough income. They're too poor. The demographic shift. No one's reaching out to the African American community in the Catholic Church. So you have this collapse of these churches and congregations. But now when the hipsters are going back into the cities, not just the gentrified areas, but all over, the Catholic Church isn't there anymore. It's 30 miles out, 45 minutes with traffic.
The church is now like a bar or just a concert hall.
Yeah, or your CrossFit gym or something like that. So all these things that the church has picked up, put down, namely community, culture has picked that up.
And what's so sad is the churches that we sold in the cities were often quite beautiful. And then we've built these ugly, monstrous things that look like Pizza Hut.
I wouldn't be surprised if you see a...
Pizza Hut looks better.
And then what I'm curious about, I think coming up, we've all been obsessed with like beauty. That's kind of been the big thing for the past few years. I think we're going to start going into the good. Because with all these things going on within our post-Christian culture, there's such a lack of good that as we begin to propose the good and live that out, and people like see that, there's going to be a draw to that. Like they're going to be drawn to us not by our great podcast, although we are great, but it's going to be more like that there's something here that I think that people are going to be drawn to, and I'm curious. I don't know what that's going to lead to because I think that's coming. Yeah. I don't know what I'm curious to see what like again, like in half a century, where are we because of that? I wonder if the church is almost more of like a safe haven at that point in time.
A place of refuge.
Yeah,
shelter
a
from the
true
storm.
Yeah,
which is the exact reason why he called it the Benedict option, because in the end of Alistair McIntyre's book, After Virtue, he says, it's not that the barbarians at the gate, they've been ruling us for quite some time, and we're waiting for a new and doubtless very different St. Benedict. And so who's going to be that figure that creates the institutions that keep the virtues and civilization alive as it's collapsing all around us? And I think that is clearly catching foxes.
Yeah.
We are the Benedict option.
I do think, but I do think what you're going to see, I will end on this, is I think the way things are set, the way things are arranged right now is going to implode.
Yeah.
So
I mean, Bishop Barron's with even the Pints with the Coinage chapters. Bishop Barron wants to do the Word on Fire Institute, where they have these houses in the city. That's responding to the market demand of people leaving suburbia and going urban, and there's nothing to feed their souls. So you have these things. What do they call, like fire?
You're going to have movements.
Well, yeah, but the fire rally, or like the night fever.
Night fever. Yeah, oh man.
They have these candlelight services of adoration, and it's just open and they usually do it in a cathedral because it's right downtown. And they open the doors and they invite people to come in and just light a candle and pray. And all of a sudden,
people to Jesus.
Yeah, and all of a sudden it creates this interior dynamism. And I think when you're talking about the good, this is the problem, though. And in that podcast, this cultural moment, they point this out. When I was growing up in the 90s, when I became a convicted Catholic, my sexual practices had to change, right? And people in my high school would look at that and be like, "You want to be a virgin? You're like, that's weird."
What's the new virgin?
Right. Well, that's weird, but there's an intensity and a heroicness to trying to do that. Now, the Christian sexual ethic is viewed as bigoted, and so someone trying to live the Christian sexual ethic is condemned. You're heteronormative, all that, you're monogamous, blah, blah, blah. And so I think this is going to be one of the great areas where we're going to have to figure out self-sacrificial generosity, loving your neighbor at your own expense is an evangelization that no one can deny. Like if I sacrifice so that you can be comforted in a time of hurt, right? Taking meals over to you, watching your kids, if you're a single mom, whatever. I think that ability to inconvenience yourself for the sake of the gospel is what will convert hearts. And I think you can only do that in community, right? If you have people who yes, I understand that. But with today's social media, I know more about what's happening to people on the other side of the world with a tsunami or an earthquake than I knew about the single mom down the street. I don't know anything about her, and she lives right next to me, but I can open the paper. Who does that? I can open my phone. I can open the app, and so that's the danger, that community solves.
Yeah, beautiful. This has been such a fun discussion. Thank
you.
This is amazing. Yeah.
I got to go to the bathroom again because I drank so much.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks a lot.
Yeah,
thank you.
Boom.
Go team, go.